I call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. We will open with an invocation from Mrs. Bender and the Pledge of Allegiance from Mr. Miller. Please rise.
Please, Lord, guide us to make the best decisions for the citizens of King George County. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We'll move on to amendments to the agenda. Mr. Miller, do we have any amendments?
I believe you had requested that we move the sheriff up
That is correct.
earlier in the agenda.
Asking to see if my colleagues would entertain moving action item 714, Sheriff's Office ARPA Law Enforcement Equipment Grant, to be the first action item. So before 704, Department of Finance resolution to ratify the FY 23-24 King George County budget.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Any other amendments, sir?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. In that case, we will move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Please, when you come up, state your name and your address, and I will start with the list of names I had who have signed up, and then once we have gone through those names, the floor will be open for anyone who would also like to address the board. So we'll start with Anna Marie Lavelle.
Hi, my name is Ana Maria Lobo. I live in Presidential Lakes. I came tonight to thank Mr. Miller and the supervisors for your service to the community. Also, a special thanks to Chris Clark, Vivian Shelton, and Lorenzo Smith. They and the staff, they did an amazing job with the Independence Day celebration. They all worked very hard. I want to ask Mrs. Annie Kapka if the supervisors have been helping her with the elimination of the county decal. Okay, to charge one-time fee, but not every year. I also want to ask about the budget, which is very important to me and the rest of the community. The people of King George want to know how much their tax will be. I hope the taxes this year are not as high as they were last year. Also, you keep telling us we need to bring more people and business to the community. For what? Some people want to change King George to be like more like Northern Virginia or Stafford or Fredericksburg or Maryland. But that's not the reason people move here. They move here for safety reasons. We have a great sheriff's department. They keep us safe. We also have a great fire and rescue squad, but by bringing more people, you put more stress on our sheriff and fire department as well as in our schools. They add the traffic on our roads. It used to take short time to go to Dahlgren and back. Now it takes 1 hour once in a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lavelle. We have next Jim Lynch.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm James Lynch, 8263 Oakwood Drive in the county, King George. I'd like to talk a little bit about the eastern section of the Dolgan Railroad Trail. The eastern part was acquired by the Monmouth partners in 1997. They, even though they owned it all these years, they didn't have any particular use for it until recently. Recently, land clearing started for the construction of a new uh, self-storage facility. The facility will extend into the old railroad right-of-way and will be on top of the existing rail bed. To help us out, the developers have rerouted the trail path to skirt around the storage facility, and so this is obviously a great help for our trail users. I got a call from Peggy Mullen of Mullen Excavating a couple of weeks ago, informing me that the new path was open to the public. We would like to express our appreciation to Mullen Excavating and the King George Gateway Self-Storage for their help in executing this reroute. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. The last one on my list up here is Mr. Bob Baird.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I want to thank you for the fine community that we have and the hard work that you have on behalf of our county. You completed a rough job in going through our budget in this last year. It's been a tough year on everybody, on the citizens with the citizens as we pay our taxes, and you in funding the resources that we need. I want to express my thanks to the King George Fire and Rescue for their fine service the other day. I don't want to point out the wonderful service here in King George, but the difficulty we've had in the eastern part of the county because of the lack of service down in the eastern part of the county. I know that's something we have to deal ahead of time, deal with Eastern Fire and Rescue. That's something that we need to put on our plate as we may proceed ahead. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. That concludes the list of those who signed up, but the floor is open for anyone else here who would like to provide comment. So please approach the podium now if you would like to.
I would like to comment. I am
Okay.
online.
Mr. Dines, do you have who this is? Could you please provide your name and your address?
I am Kathy Phillips, and I am at 7085 Steamboat Court in Hopyard Farm. First of all, I would like to thank you all for the work that you do. And I do appreciate everything that you do, and also thank our Sheriff's Department for the work that they do. I live near the river, and even though there's lots of traffic with boaters, etc., I do feel very safe. I see them patrolling regularly, and so that's a wonderful thing. However, I did attend the meeting, earlier where you accepted the memorandum of understanding with Birchwood. I'd like to ask that you include in the memorandum of understanding and ultimately the contract with Birchwood some way to mitigate or offset the fines that residents are paying along with their regular water bills to address the debt. I closed on my house last August. And, I went through the sales process and read the HOA for Hop Yard. And at no point was I told that I would be paying a tax on, debt or fines that were levied before I even thought of living in King George County. I believe that the average resident pays about $100 extra on their water bill. That does not include sewage and, water bill usage. And I feel like that fact, I feel like it was kind of like a bait and switch scheme. And also, I just don't understand why I have to pay an extra $100 every month to address the debt that was accrued by the, Okay, so that's it. I cannot comment anymore. But I would like you to include in that memorandum of understanding with
Ms.
Birchwood,
Phillips,
perhaps.
we did capture that, so we have that information. The time is up, but if you do want to codify it in an email, you can also send it to us with that to rehash it as well if you would like. But we did capture your request for including the MOU, those requests you had in regards to the payments. So we've captured that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, move on. I believe Ms. Fairfax.
Good evening, Debbie Fairfax, 623 Kings Highway. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. With regard to the two zones tonight, the King George Defense Production Zone Ordinance and the Technology Zone Ordinance, I'd like to make 3 comments. First of all, in Spotsylvania, they codify in their ordinance how long the incentive period is. It's a 5-year incentive period, and a business can apply for up to 1 additional one. I think it would be a good idea to put some limitations on how long the incentive period is and require them to reapply, because that gives us some measure of control a little bit over how things are going with that particular business. I would also like to say that Spotsylvania's ordinance spells out, quote, zoning ordinance not affected. This article is an economic development incentive and is not a zoning change. Nothing herein shall be construed to affect any provision or requirement of any county zoning ordinance. And given that we've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, we've garnered a lot of public input, and we've paid a lot of money to develop a zoning ordinance that's still in process, I think it would be great to spell out in our ordinance, as does a neighboring locality who's also considering some of these same types of things, that the zoning ordinance is not affected. Additionally, in Spotsy's ordinance, they spell out, the board reserves the right to remove qualified either defense production status or technology zone status from any business that is not compliant with any ordinance, regulation, policy, or other legal requirement. I think those would be great additions to this ordinance that would make it something that is good for the citizens of our county. Thanks a lot.
Do we have anyone else for public comment?
Ken Stroud, 5405 Kings Highway, King George, Virginia. So I'm going to make a few comments tonight regarding the county tax assessments that took place. The property assessor, Stephen Chastain, that did the assessment, he did it for several other counties to include Pennsylvania County and King William County. Some of the counties tossed out as assessments because they found that the increases assessed the value unreasonable, and in some cases, the values of property increased by 150%, as did the property values in King George. Some of the properties in King George increased from 50 to 150%. In several different properties looked at before making the comment, some increased by the 50, 88%, 150%. Some of them were totally misnamed. So where the property is clearly a wooded area, he classified it as a pasture land. Okay, so some of it may be tillable and it's a pasture land and it's right next to pasture land. The same property is classified as both either tillable or pasture land, but the assessed value increases by a couple $1,000s. Clearly an error. The assessments, to our understanding, were not conducted with eyesight, or they weren't done with a using the means to actually view the property, but rather using Google Maps. In addition to the extreme increase assessed on the land value, there were large portions of the land that as I said, were mislabeled. They were clearly densely wooded. So I believe that the mislabeling of the land is a continuation of poor performance by the assessor in the previous counties. In other counties he assessed reported were never actually gone out to see the properties. Instead, he was using the Google Maps and not necessarily using a drone or something that allowed you to get real-time visibility of that. I made some of these comments back in June at the supervisors meeting. Those comments were edited out of the YouTube video. They were edited out of the minutes. So I've had people say, wasn't that illegal? I don't know if it's illegal or not, but it's clearly not ethical that you edit out the meeting minutes and my comments here in the meeting so that the population, your constituents, can't see the comments that are made. And it definitely has the appearance that something is being hidden. I mean, clearly it's being hidden because the comments are edited out. So we'll see if you edit this video as well. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Dines, do we have anyone else online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, I will close public comment and we'll move on to reports from members of the board. Mrs. Bender.
Hold on. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who came out and spoke. I want to address a couple. Mr. Barrett, I'm glad I came and spoke to you. I'm so happy you're here with us and able to come up and speak to the meeting. And you're always very involved in the community. And I thank our fire and rescue also for their assistance with Mr. Barrett. But I'm just so happy to see you here. Ms. Phillips, your representative on the Service Authority Board is Mr. Alan Parker. I'm sure he would be willing to answer some questions. If not, you can contact me anytime and I will try to answer your questions, being a new member of our community, about the Service Authority and maybe its history and how the debt is assessed and everything else. So please contact myself or Mr. Parker, who would be your representative and who lives in Hop Yard. As always, I do appreciate everybody comes and speaks. It's really good to have the public come out and give us their opinion. I've heard from a lot of folks recently, including people that have found me many different locations to talk to me about concerns about taxes, a lot of different topics. So I always appreciate talking with people. And I do want to give a shout out to our fire, our EMS, our sheriff's office, and our Parks and Rec and county general properties, anybody that was involved in the fireworks celebration. I heard from numerous citizens about how enjoyable and how much they appreciate that the county puts on such a nice show to put a smile on a lot of people's faces in King George. So I just want to thank them. They do a great job, and it is a lot of work. Mr. Clark was very exhausted in his staff when I saw him on Saturday, but they did a great job. So I want to thank them for their work. After our Service Authority budget hearing, as I stated in the Service Authority meeting, we had some good conversation with some citizens and clarified some information. And one of the citizens contacted me later thanking Mr. Miller and his staff for coming out and addressing a problem that ended up not being a problem, but they were able to explain why they might have thought, and they have a greater appreciation, and they really did thank us for coming out and addressing their concerns. I attended the virtually, Ms. Kupka was at the GWRC FAMPO meeting. And one of the things I want to bring up concerning that is to pay attention, all of us, to the push for affordable housing and whatever that exactly means, especially regionally and statewide. There's a big push for high density housing and density housing around transportation hubs. So something we need to be mindful and watch out and maybe just become better informed about that. I had a Zoom meeting with quite a few folks concerning affordable housing and met with some realtors. And the reason why I did that is because I'm on the work group at the House there's 3 House bills involved, this work group at the state level, and it's about affordable housing. So I wanted to get and understand regionally to bring back information. And our meeting is next week on July 19th. So in the August meeting, I'll bring back a report to my colleagues. Maybe there's supposed to be some new information they're going to give us during that meeting. So I'm looking forward to it. I want to have a shout out to Pat Holland and her staff at Healthy Generations. I serve on that board. The county is one of our outside agencies we fund. I'm very excited to hear that we're given a grant to help set up a program to have some kind of mechanism to be able to contact our citizens that reach out to them that want to have somebody to check on them during an emergency. So they're facilitating in our region. They've got a grant for it to go out and be that point of contact. So if there's a problem, they can create a list. And I'm sure they'll be reaching out to our staff on fire and EMS to start maybe getting some information. And I'm just excited that that's actually coming to fruition. Update I want to give on all points. Broad one, I want to thank Mr. Miner for getting us some information yesterday. I've had quite a few constituents in the Shiloh area that want to know when we're going to get internet service. We've had a lot of promises, but I'm going to give a little timeline. June 2023, a substantial completion of the Richmond County network. Kind of disappointed. That should have been us. July 2023, they're going to light up an event in Northumberland. And when they use the term light, they mean turn on the service. September 2023, substantial completion of Northern Northumberland network. October 2023 is when King George is supposed to have their lighting event. And phase 1 and 2 of the King George network should be substantial completion. And then it goes on. But it was good for the update, but I am still disappointed that King George wasn't first. And we have a lot of citizens that really could use, the internet service. And hopefully it comes a little earlier than what is they have stated to us. And that is the end of my report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. Mr. Collins.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Good to hear people online. If you all were paying attention to the Water Authority meeting, they entered into an MOU of a minimum of 600,000 gallons for the Birchwood project. From my understanding, there's 6 million gallons of water available, and we started out with 600,000. We should have started out a lot higher and then maybe worked down from that. And we're also going to have to pay for that water. They're going to give us land for a water treatment plant, but I didn't see anything where there would be any opportunities for that to be taken care of since they're going to be the biggest user on that. Since I'm on the Water Authority, Ms. Phillips, the Water Authority, no matter what other people's opinions are, is a disaster. The Water Authority is a business plan that does not work. It never has worked. You used to have all members of the Board of Supervisors on there. Now you have a couple members of the Board of Supervisors, and they are not customers of the authority. The debt was here when I got here, and it's a huge problem that we have to pay this debt. Ms. Phillips spoke of $100. I pay $200 in debt. That means my water bill is at least $400. So, you know, that in the next year, we need to come up with some more solutions. And when the Water Authority entered into an MOU without discussions with the Board of Supervisors in this proposed development, it seems like, I mean, I do not hear much from the Water Authority at all in regards to their plans. So the Water Authority and the Board of Supervisors are not talking, so that creates problems. Mr. Beard, so my pastor said to pray big and you will see big. So this entire community has been praying for you during your trying times. And I am so happy to see you today, you don't even know. We love you, and we're glad that everything's going along well. Ms. Fish, I just want to make a comment to you. She is the administrative assistant to Mr. Miller, and she does the minutes for the meetings. And the minutes from the time that I started here a year ago and now is unbelievable. Thank you. You can see everything that's going on in the meeting. I hope that that problem with Mr. Stroud will be taken care of. I don't know what that issue is, but I just want to tell you that you do a good job on that, and I appreciate that. So sometimes we don't tell you these things, and I want to make sure that's in public. Mr. Lynch, I'm glad that everything worked out with the trail in that organization. Ms. Fairfax, I agree with all three of your suggestions, and we'll have an opportunity to speak about that in a few minutes. And I hope everyone is enjoying their summer. School will be starting soon, and school buses will be out, so I ask you to be careful. And Ms. Hall, I would be remiss and not saying that we'll miss you, and we thank you for your service. And we wish you the best in the future. And you're still going to be a King George resident, right? Thank you. Thank everyone for coming out. That ends my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mrs. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I want to first off thank everyone who made the Independence Day celebration on Saturday once again a successful event. I want to thank Ms. Hall for her dedicated service to our community for 18 years. Thank you very much. You will be missed. With regard to some public comment, Mr. Lynch, thank you for the update on the reroute. I'm glad that they were able to make that work for you all. Mr. Baird, very glad to see you. Ms. Phillips, I have noted your request with regard to the Birchwood MOU and the debt. Mrs. Fairfax, thank you very much for joining us. As usual, you continue to stay on top of issues as they evolve, and we'll have more consideration of that matter later, as Mr. Collins stated. Mr. Stroud, I am happy to meet with you about your concern. I had not heard about that until you brought it forward this evening, so I would be happy to meet with you regarding same. Ms. Lovell, these two motions, you have kept up with this throughout during the course of the budget cycle. And so with that, I would move to direct the county attorney to recirculate the draft proration ordinance to the board as it was previously circulated to us when we had the work session with the Commissioner of the Revenue and the Treasurer. So recirculate the draft proration ordinance to the board for review to bring the draft ordinance to the next available meeting for consideration of direction to advertise a public hearing for adoption effective January 1, 2024.
Second.
So just so everyone's clear, that would be 2 readings. So we'd have it, then we would have to have a second one at a public hearing.
All right, so I heard a motion, probably second it. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
And my second motion, I move to direct the county attorney to review Chapter 9, Article 2, Vehicle License, and any other affected sections of the Code of Ordinances for any modification or revocation necessary to abolish the vehicle license fee effective January 1, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kupka. Mr. Stonehill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Thank you for everybody that came out tonight to speak. Appreciate when you all come out and have all those comments. Ms. Lavelle, thank you. Hopefully we can get some of those, get that tax, the old sticker finally done and off of. Mr. Lynch, thanks for the update on the rails of trails. I was kind of wondering what they were doing back there with putting a new building across there. Ms. Fairfax, thanks for coming out like usual. And like Mr. Collins, you brought up some very good points, and I agree with most of them, and we'll look into those, but thanks for staying on top of that. Mr. Stroud, I agree with you 100%. That was an awful assessment, and I hope any other counties never have to deal with this gentleman again. He's lots and lots of complaints on that company, and I have no idea how your comments got cut out of a live YouTube, but look into it. Thanks to the staff for the fireworks. Unfortunately, I did not get to attend it, but I spoke to a lot of people who said, like usual, it was fantastic. And a number of people said it was the best they've ever seen. In the last few years I've been to them, they're probably the best I've ever seen. But thanks for everybody that worked on staff and to get that accomplished. Mr. Baird, very happy to see you up and about and able to come speak to us. And I agree, fire rescue and law enforcement is great in our King George County community. Ms. Hall, Heather, congratulations on your move, and I wish you the best in your new endeavor. You've been around here a very long time, and the county is thankful of that. So good luck on your next move. And today I had a conversation with the director of the Charles County Health Department. I was getting an update on the closure of the river that they had over the weekend for Rozier Creek across the Potomac and down through Colonial Beach. And they said that today at 6:30 they should have been getting some more reports, and to finally lift all those for swimming. The swimming they had lifted, except on the Charles County side, but all the shell fishing and other uses of the river. They said that should be taken care of today. So be curious to see what they come up with. Well, it borders Rozier Creek, which is half of our county. Correct. Correct. Right. It didn't have anything to do, but it borders King George County. And since the river comes right along King George County, that's why I spoke to them. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. I would just like to say, first of all, thank you to staff for the fireworks the past weekend. It was always a great event, and so we had a really great turnout. always a lot of fun, and it's a great opportunity to celebrate. So thank you to staff for all their hard work to make that happen and make that available to our citizens. It was awesome. So moving on to comments, Ms. Lavelle. Obviously, you heard from what Ms. Kupka had to say, so hopefully that will work to address some of your concerns with the decal as we look to move forward with that. And you also brought up asking about bringing more people and business to the county. I can't speak for my colleagues. I don't want to put words in their mouth. I don't know if anyone in here is really saying let's bring more people, more homes. At the end of the day, people have by right usage of property. So if they build a home on a piece of agricultural land, they have that right. Business, though, does have an advantage because while I agree with you, that does expand the need for services like fire and rescue and sheriff's department. Depending on the type of business that can come in, it can also generate a fair amount of revenue, which can then provide for those services on top of meeting other people's services, such as citizens, so that it could address, the tax rate from the perspective of what's expected from the taxpayer to accept as a burden for providing those services. So I do think there is a value in business coming in. I'm not opposed to people living in our county. I'm not really looking to increase density for high density home districts in our community, really particularly. But at the end of the day, if someone has by right usage, they obviously have that right to use that property how they want. Mr. Lynch, thank you for the information about the self-storage, and I'm glad that it's worked out well. And just thank you for your recognizing that they've worked with your organization as well. It's always good to hear that. Mr. Baird, it's good to see you. Glad that you're up and out and about and sharing your comments about King George Fire and Rescue. I think it is really good as well. Ms. Phillips, that as Ms. Binder said, I think Mr. Parker, he is the James Madison District member on the Service Authority. I'm the Board of Supervisor representative to the James Madison District. But Mr. Parker is a customer and he does serve on that board. So I would say that reaching out to him would probably be of a lot of value because it is definitely a Service Authority question that you are referring to here. Ms. Fairfax, again, thank you. I think everyone said it, but thank you for coming in and providing recommendations. We will be looking at that ordinance. And so I do appreciate having some recommendations on things that could possibly be addressed to maybe firm up those ordinances to make sure that we have good ordinances for our county. And Mr. Stroud, I will circle back with you. We'll have to, I'm not sure what meeting it was, but I can circle back with you and we can discuss in particular what it is, and we can see if something was removed and how, if it was, and just not sure. So, but I'll circle back with you this week. So we'll look to address whatever's going on with that. So just thank you everyone who came out and provided comment. And that will close reports from members of the board. So we will move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, can I propose that we do a separate motion for the consent agenda items 0701, 0701.1, and 0701.2 as presented? Because then there will be another one with regard to the minutes, which I did ask that staff circulate an email to all of you so you were aware of what the edits were.
Yes, ma'am. Someone would like to make a motion to approve 701.1 and 701.2 as presented. I would be willing to entertain that.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda 07.01.1 and 07-01.2 as presented.
Second.
Motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, with that, I would move approval of the minutes, item 0701.3, with the edits that I asked staff to circulate to you all.
Okay. I have a motion.
Second.
Properly seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chair, can I add something with regard to that?
Yeah.
Just for purposes of being fully transparent, the suggestions that I asked for in the minutes had to do with which individual statements were attributed to, not affecting the content of the minutes. Just there were some names that were not the correct speaker. That's all. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any other discussion? right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. I would just ask that staff make sure that those minutes get resolved and then posted as well so everyone can pull them down and see them. Yep, thank you. All right, we'll move on to constitutional officers' reports. So we'll start with the Commissioner of the Revenue.
I believe she is calling in. Ms. Hart was going to call in.
Okay.
And Ms. Regina is also here as well, so.
Can everyone hear me?
Was that Mrs. Hart?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Okay. Hang on.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm ready to give my report.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, for the sale of our cigarette stamps, July 1 of 22 through June 30th of 23, $1,800,040.
I feel like we lost her again.
314,666.
Repeat that, Ms. Hart.
318,369.
All right, so I think this is a bit of a challenge trying to use a phone and with the microphone. So why don't we just ask Ms. Hart to come to the next meeting and provide this information?
Okay. Well,
yeah. Okay.
All right. I can do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on. Sheriff Giles.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For my constitutional officer's report, I'm going to report on the tax cigarettes investigation. On June 26, 2023, Deanna Price and Deputy Simon inspected cigarette retail stores. All stores except two were in compliance. The two non-compliant stores are the Tobacco Hut and the Vape, located at 7975 Kings Highway in King George. The Tobacco Hut and Vape located at 4863 James Madison Parkway in Dahlgren. The stores were not compliant under County Code 14-207, which is titled Report and Records. The report is due on the 20th of each month. Both stores are owned by Thayer Salih and managed by, I'm not even going to try to butcher this guy's name, but Alabadi, we'll just say with that. On June 28th, 2023, Deputy Simon spoke to Deputy Commonwealth Attorney Charlie Clark and advised him that both stores were not compliant and have never turned in an inventory sheet. Chief Deputy Commonwealth Attorney Clark advised Deputy Simon to get warrants. On June 29th, 2023, Deputy Simon went before the magistrate and swore out two Class 1 misdemeanor warrants against Mr. Alabadi under King George County Code 14-207, one for each store that he manages. On June 30th, 2023, at approximately 1400 hours, Mr. Alabadi reported to the King George Sheriff's Office and had the warrant served. So that concludes my report on the cigarette tax, and I can answer any questions if you have it.
Does anyone have any questions for Sheriff?
I have one that's not related to that report.
Go ahead.
So we get the 911 calls for the fire and rescue department, or some of us do, I do. And one troubling one came in down at the Fast Mart in Dahlgren. Started out as a robbery, and then I don't know what it turned into.
An arrest.
So my question is the police officer safe that was involved in that incident because it didn't give the full details. It said that the suspect attempted suicide and was charging the deputy. So I never got to fill out the rest of what the occurrence is. So could you give us a brief
The
summary?
deputy defended himself and was seen by the emergency room with no injuries, was just precautionary, along with the suspect.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any other questions for the sheriff? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we move on to the treasurer's office monthly report. Do we have anyone from the treasurer's office? Okay. Mr. Miller, would you be willing to reach out to Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir.
He comes to the next meeting. Thank you. Thank you. All right, move on to the county attorney's report. Ms. Lackey.
I just have one item for general information this evening. The Opioid Abatement Authority did approve the regional grant for the opioid abatement efforts, of which King George is a participant. It was described in the April 4th and May 2nd Board of Supervisors meetings. The approved projects are one involving a local match, which is to reestablish a 12-bed crisis stabilization unit at the Sunshine Lady House to treat medical detox services associated with people having a co-occurring mental health crisis. And the state funds will be used to establish a mobile medication-assisted treatment program for opioid abatement. That mobile service program is committed to visit the county at least once a week once it's up and running.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Lackey? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lackey. In that case, we will move on to presentations and reports. I believe we have Sheriff again.
Good evening again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'd like to kind of give you an update on where we're at with the new radio system, the upgrade. On June 25th through the 27th, myself, Chief Basham, Tiffany Brown from the Sheriff's Office, and Captain Lynn from the Fire Department flew out to Chicago to the Motorola Solutions corporate office to see and test the new radio system. Several tests were done, as you can see from the packet provided in your board packet. And the radio system was found to be compliant with all the tests performed. After reviewing and testing the Motorola disassembled the system that they tested and packaged it out for shipping. And we're expecting that delivery tomorrow. So what I'd like to do is kind of turn the presentation over to Sean, who is with Motorola Solutions and the project manager for that. So Sean.
Mr. Chairman and the board, thank you for your time. I just wanted to come and explain some of the things that we did when we were out there in Elgin, out near Chicago. We called it an experience because this wasn't just Motorola giving you a demonstration of what a system could do. This was the customer interacting with their system. These were the exact radios that you'll be getting here in the county. We were able to take everything that will go into the shelters and display it. And we do have some pictures here in the slideshow. I did put a couple of the team members in there because I just wanted to embarrass them in public a little bit. But if you're able to go to the next slide. Like the sheriff said, the team that came out, they were actually able to test the equipment. They were able to go through everything they would look at through dispatch and how it's going to appear to them throughout the county. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the entire radio system. This is what got broken down into pieces and what will be going inside of each shelter. And this is King George's actual equipment. It was tested, not just by us, but we were able to have the county test it and utilize it and see how it works. This helps mitigate any problems that comes here. So when it gets here, if there's any problems, we're able to deal with it much quicker. Next slide, please. I just took a couple of separate pictures just to give you an idea of the size. I know it was hard to kind of tell from everything being put together, but it's quite a bit of equipment. But we've already measured everything out to get into the shelters, and everything will work out just fine. Sure. Okay. I believe there's one more slide. And that was the entire team that was out there testing. I did bring someone with me to help answer any technical questions. I'm the project manager, and my technical ability is a little bit limited, but I brought a team with me to answer any questions. But what I can do is help give a timeline. So as the sheriff said, we're expecting the equipment to come in tomorrow, and that's the equipment that you saw in the pictures. Here in the next 2 to 3 months, we expect to have the shelters in and getting our work done. Still pushing, getting everything done and tested. Around this time next year, we should be done. That is our goal. So, any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? I'll start with Ms. Cuppa.
Not really a question, just a comment. I want to thank you all and everyone on our staff involved on the work on this project. It's a huge asset for both our Fire Rescue Emergency Services Department and our Sheriff's Office. And the test packet that we received was fascinating. I mean, I could tell the test was run when the EA button gets pushed. Does the air get cleared and reserved for the person who pushed the EA button on their portable? So thank you so much for all of your work on this.
Good evening, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I read the acceptance test plan from page 83 to page 147. And I understood about 42% of it.
That's a pretty high number. So
So this test plan, what it says is that the system works without fail. Is that what that means?
yes, sir.
At the end, I was hoping that there would be a summary, or at least in the beginning, but there wasn't. So is there any summary that's available?
We can compile a list of all the tests that were done, and with all the tests passing, there wasn't any failures. But we can probably formulate a summary based off of all of the passing tests that they did, and have that prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
I would love that summary for a layperson. I would appreciate. I want to thank you too. My dad would have loved this because he used to do this stuff. So it's cool to see, and I'm glad this is really help our community. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, sir, thank you so much for coming out and providing the brief. Thank you, Sheriff. All right, we have our second presentation, Ms. Parker, the King George Historical Society.
Oh yeah. So could you turn on the news to the program? Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to start out just by thanking the board and the county in general, Mr. Mason and everybody that had anything to do with helping our society reorganize and get back on our feet. I think you'll see by the presentation that we've accomplished a lot in about a 9-month period, and we're here tonight kind of continue the conversation about space in the courthouse, which I think most of you probably realize has been going on since 1994, beginning with James Mullen and then throughout the years with Miss Lee. So this is kind of a continuation, but I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. So we're going to talk about accomplishments and then the request for the new space in general, and then our vision for the future, which I think is very important. I also want to make the distinction between our society and the museum itself. So we recognize the fact that this is a historical society made up of people who are dedicated to preserving the history of the county and educating people in the county and doing everything we can to share it. But it's not to say that we own the contents of the museum. We want to be good stewards of the contents of the museum. Those contents of the museum belong to the county, and we recognize that. And that helps, I think, with the request for space. I'm joined tonight also, I want to mention, by several members of our membership. We have a very dedicated membership. You've already seen the Vice President, the Miracle Man, Bob Baird. Our treasurer is here, Lynn Pardee. Our secretary tonight cannot make it, Carol Worley. We have Bobby King, who has been part of the membership for 30,000 years, and Harriet Gallahan, who are and these are people that are routine go-tos for advice, especially for people like me who have not been involved in nearly the amount of time that some of these people have been involved. Mr. Earl Leach is here. Earl Leach is a regular staffer in the museum. Here, he just handed over almost 450 photographs of artifacts in our museum that we will use as a pool for data to upload to our new website. He just handed that off tonight. We've also accomplished, well, let me just go through the list. And I don't want to read every one of these. I know you have a lot to do on your typical meetings. But we're going to start with accomplishments just since October last year. We did have an audit completed by our CPA. We have that CPA on retainer now for financial reviews and annual audits. Our 501c3 reactivation is ongoing. It's in the hands of the IRS. We have not a lot we can do with the speed with which the IRS is going to approve the reactivation. We've been assured by the CPA that all of these things are going to happen. It's a matter of time. We've reorganized some administrative operations, mainly so that there's transparency across the executive committee and for the members. So it's typical for us to use email now to let the entire membership know, and the email goes out to about 157 members across the nation to let them know exactly what's going on, what's coming up. We also include Zoom in our meetings now, so we have people routinely Zooming in for our meetings that are once a month. We have recently, continuing an inventory, but the inventory and categorization of the book collection in the museum is complete to the point where we have just over 1,000 listings in this collection. It might sound boring to some, but we're actually excited about the idea to have room to place these books in proper categories so that they can be shared efficiently with the public. That's a big thing for us, and we're really looking forward to that. So we staffed a table at the 2022 Fall Festival, but the big deal there was not only that we were able to share the things that people are used to, our ornaments, our pottery, but we created Venmo and Square accounts to increase sales opportunities. In that particular Fall Festival day, we made over $1,000 in sales, and that was probably because we did more than take checks and cash. We've partnered with the county and Parks and Rec for the annual tree lighting. We hosted the annual Christmas dinner at the Back Porch Vineyard, very successful, and we just want to go there every time we do anything, but we probably won't, but we want to. We supported the Historic Garden Week by staffing trolleys to deliver King George history to attendees. So that was when somebody actually asked me to come and blab and blab and blab and blab and blab, and it was fun. And Coons Campbell helped with that. We partnered with the King George High School History Club, and this is their inaugural year. I don't know if you're aware that the King George High School has a history club for the first time this past year. So we got in touch with them. We invited them to a meeting. They were very excited to work with us in ventures. And the first one that we thought of was one that was recommended to us by Sheriff Giles, which was to fill a time capsule. So this meeting on July 20, this month, will be a workshop to fill that capsule, and they will join us for that. We staffed a table at the Family Day event at Sealston, and that website there is our brand new website. It launched about 2 months ago. We plan to publicize the launch at our picnic, which we had to postpone because of weather, so we did not have the picnic. So it's been kind of a quiet launching of the website. We now have a brand new computer with high-speed internet and Wi-Fi for the museum. And so we're calling that area that we have right there right now the Genealogy Research Center. So the Family Tree Maker software will allow people to come in and upload their Ancestry.com information to start over, basically, in building a genealogy database. As you remember, we don't have the database that we had when Ms. Lee was part of the membership before she passed away. So we are doing everything we can to build something as fast as we can so that people can come into our museum, sit down, type in a name, type in a location, and just get hits and help them build something for themselves. We have updated the Constitution and bylaws, and it is under final review right now by the general membership. Our executive committee voted to include Ms. Lee by name in our scholarship application. That application has been updated and is under final review by the general membership also. We've adopted a new logo and our new letterhead, which you see in the upper left-hand corner there. And now for the request for a new space, we mainly are concerned with having a storage and prep location And when we talk about prep location, it's really so that you're aware that Ryan Portner has been involved in for years as an archivist in the museum, but he's also the person who does a lot of the cleaning of the artifacts and determinations of the artifacts. But that equipment he uses is at his house. We don't have room for that, and there's no place for that. So a prep location is very necessary, and not only for things like that, but to build what we hope will be mobile exhibits. So the museum space itself, which would have fixed displays, lockable display cabinets. We would hope to have monthly observation type exhibits, mobile exhibits, things that we could take elsewhere, things that we could take in other areas of the courthouse if we wanted to. And then a genealogy center, which would just basically be the same thing that I just described, but in a something other than the little closet that we've got it in right now. It's just about enough for one person. And this is a diagram of the courthouse as it exists now. On the very far right-hand side there in the red box, that's the old jail, if you will, which is the museum that we occupy now. And what we would like to request is the rectangular area that you see the two offices that connect to this section that we're in right now. The idea is that the section that we're in right now would be used for storage and prep, and then the section that it's connected to would be used for museum space, and then possibly training or field trips, anything like that. It would all be museum space, but it would be nice to have that small little section connected to it to use for ventures like that. The vision for the future involves a lot of that, to populate and promote the website. We're not really rushing to just dump everything that we have on the website. We want to be meticulous about it. I've gotten a lot of advice from Rob Gates from the Dahlgren Heritage Museum using their website kind of as a model. We want to offer genealogy research workshops to the public. And as far as engaging with the county school system, Ryan Portner actually came up with a really good idea for a field trip, that it would be cool to have a busload of students come to the museum, get off the bus, see the museum, learn about the museum, get back on the bus, and then have maybe 2 reps from the museum continue on a journey on the bus throughout the county to some other historic locations and speak about those locations. So field trips like that, I think, would be a big benefit for not only the students, but for our members. We'd like to continue to work with the King George High School History Club to boost memberships for both organizations. And then expanding our event participation, and we've already done that. So we actually will be at the King George Farmers Market. This year, the membership voted for the Ralph Bunche High School to be the ornament for 2023. That ornament will actually be ready for sale, I think, by the end of this month, if not early in August. So this will be the first time that I think it will be offered for sale before the Fall Festival, because both organizations, ours, Historical Society, and the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association, will have community days at the farmers market, one in August and one in September. We also had a suggestion at the car show. We just had the Frank Coates car show recently. That would be an opportunity to take mobile displays that we talked about, where we talked about the histories of Morris Chevrolet, histories of Cliff Ford, things that were in the county for a long, long time, with names in the county that have been around since the beginning. Living history events, and I'm referencing Historic Port Royal. So I'm a member of Historic Port Royal's board, and I've learned a lot from Historic Port Royal in the way that they do things. They're very small. They look a lot like us. Their museum is small, but it is amazing. I don't know if you've been there, but you should really make a visit. But their events, they have a partnership with Caroline County, where they receive money every year to put on 4 events per year. July 4th was one. The one I attended before that has living history events as part of it. These are things we can do in the location we're in now, with the parking lot that we have behind us. These are things that can happen on our lawn, things that can happen on the parking lot. So those are things that we aspire to. And then I mentioned the farmers market, that we're staffing a table in September. So that is, I'm a fast talker. So that's it in a nutshell. And I just want to thank you again for everything that you've done to see that the museum was reopened and continues on its path. It's important to a lot of people. And there's a lot more to do. I feel like we've done a lot. I'm very, very proud of our progress and proud of the people that have worked, the hours they've worked in the museum. like most organization, there's a handful of 5 or 6 that are doing most of those hours. They enjoy it. There's also been a flood of teachers that have retired recently. I plan to call every one of them and ask if they would like to join our membership and help us out in our museum. So I'm open to any questions if you have any.
So, Ms. Parker, I'd just like to say thank you for coming out and for the rest of your board for coming out as well. It's really nice to have you all here to present to us. I'll ask my colleagues, does anyone have any questions in particular for Ms. Parker?
Not a question, Mr. Chair, but I just want to compliment you all on everything you've done to right the ship. I was at the museum, as you know, on Saturday and was very impressed with how orderly it was and the displays, and you can see that you all have put in a lot of work. I love the new logo. I checked out, love the new website. It's very crisp, clean. Looking forward to see you all develop it much more. And the newsletter, shout out to Mrs. Inseth back there, bang up job on that.
That's the only one I didn't mention. I apologize. So Tammy Inseth was a coup for me. She came on very quickly at the end of the fall last year and asked if I needed help with the newsletter. I need all the help with the newsletter. You can have it. Here you go. Thank you so much. And she's just an example of people who are coming to us, asking if they can do anything for us because of their love for history and wanting to be a part of this. And she is invaluable, as most of you already know. So
good stuff. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a lot of people know, I've been with the Historical Society for a while, and I'm really excited to see the progress. And one of the things that I mentioned to Elizabeth and Jean several years ago is, and Bobby, many times having lunch on Thursdays, is we need to make sure your legacy survives. And all the work that a lot of people, that some have passed away, have done for the museum. So it's nice to see people, and some young folks actually pick up the mantle. You have a young man, and I forgot his name, escapes me at the moment.
Sam Buckley.
Sam, he's there every Thursday. God bless him. He tried to move that piece of the bridge over there, and we got it over. But it's really nice to see the youth coming out to it, and to see it continue and survive, and hopefully have a space, locked in the renovated courthouse. Will be great to see that promise that was a handshake many years ago continue on, and it was a long time ago. So it's just great. Thank you to all the members that have made it possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Miller, did you have a question?
I just wanted to point out at your desks, there is a memo from me and also an attachment that's from Mr. Tony Bell with Mosley Architect. We met with Ms. Parker, and the space that she showed, if Mr. Dines could go back to that. Yes. So Mr. Mosley was able to configure, and you'll see on your information that request can be met in terms of what they're looking at right now. And we wanted to make sure that was available for you all, so that, we met your needs. But I think we had a very productive meeting, and we appreciate Ms. Parker's involvement in that. And so,
No, I appreciate the meeting. And in fact, I can't believe I forgot about this piece. One of the suggestions that came out of the meeting was that the main entrance to the courthouse, that it would be nice to have lockable display cases left and right as you enter the courthouse, so that artifacts can be displayed in the main foyer of the courthouse. And then on weekends like Fall Festival weekend or event weekends, that could be opened up. We would man that and invite people to see the museum, in addition to what could be mobile exhibits placed in the foyer, in addition to the lockable displays. So there's a lot of that came out of the blue for Mr. Kiesenberry, and I was very appreciative of people are thinking about this stuff, and it means a lot. So I'm very appreciative for the meeting, and for that, I'm excited about the lockable display cases, and we're a long ways out. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Stonehill, did you have something?
Not a question, just thanks for coming out. You guys have done, as Mrs. Kupka said, a great job for getting this back and up on its feet. I need to get over there. I haven't been over there yet to go check it out, what you've all done. But I mean, King George has just oodles of history. And, if we had a really nice place that people could come out and check it out, I mean, I'm sure we have a lot more artifacts and history than we have room for. So just say thanks for you and your staff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Okay. We'll move on to action items. And as I said, and we made a motion, we'll move first with Sheriff Giles's action item, which is 0714, amend the appropriate FY 23-24 operating budget for the acceptance of the DCJS.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you moving my agenda, and Jackie, I'm sorry I messed your agenda up, but appreciate it. On May 11th, 2023, the King George County Sheriff's Office was awarded a grant in the amount of $177,000 from the Department of Criminal Justice Services. These funds will be used to procure equipment to be used for law enforcement purposes. I'm recommending that you authorize the county administrator to accept the DCJS ARPA law enforcement equipment grant in the amount of $177,000 and to appropriate the funds by establishing a revenue line for the grant and an expenditure line for the eligible purchases under the grant.
All right, do we have any questions for Sheriff? Okay.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the county administrator to accept the DCJS ARPA law enforcement equipment grant in the amount of $177,000.00 and to appropriate the funds by establishing a revenue line for the grant and an expenditure line for eligible purchases under the grant.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, Sheriff. We'll move back to 704.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. In your packet was included a resolution that we need to ratify the fiscal year 2023-2024 King George County operating budget, as there was not a separate action to approve the budget. The approval was included with the appropriation board action, and Ms. Lackey felt that it was cleanest if we came back and just ratified that we did approve it as we adopted it as we approved the appropriation. So with that, I ask that you adopt the resolution as presented.
Any questions? Okay.
I move adoption of the resolution to ratify the fiscal year 2024 budget as appropriated June 20, 2023 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank
you. Move on to 0705, destruction of the cigarettes, which I believe is Ms. Puckett. Well, she was going to call. Was she going to use the app, or is she calling in? What's the?
Can I ask a question of the sheriffs?
Sheriff, would you be willing to come up?
Sheriff, is there a destruction order that's been signed by the circuit court judge on these cigarettes?
I don't think we need one. Is that true, Ms. Lackey? The fact that we tried to, they already said that we could either, per the ordinance, destroy them, use them for training, or sell them outright. And they did 3 attempts on an auction. And because they're a year old, nobody had any interest in them at all. So per the ordinance, under those 3 circumstances we have, those 3, we don't need a circuit court judge.
Ms. Lackey, aren't they held as evidence for?
So they're no longer evidence. They've been forfeited, so they are county property, and so that's why the attempts were made to auction them unsuccessfully. And so the ordinance does provide that possible permissive uses of the forfeited items are under the control of the Commissioner of Revenue. However, if she recommends destruction, it has to be approved by the Board of Supervisors.
So who has the cigarettes?
I do. They're in my evidence locker.
That's
It's
why.
storage.
That's why I would think that would be a good idea to get a destruction order. I mean, you know, you're the sheriff, so you decide what you want to do.
Okay. So do we not have anyone here to present about the,
I did speak to Ms. Hart, and that was essentially what she was going to say, that they had made several attempts to auction it off, and those auctions failed. And since the cigarettes are well over a year old, nobody has any interest in them,
okay.
essentially.
Okay, so Ms. Puckett, do you have anything additional to add?
And her recommendation is for destruction.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does anyone have any particular questions? I know Mr. Collins had his. Anything else though?
Mr. Chair, the ordinance does say, upon consent of a majority of the Board of Supervisors, forfeited cigarettes may be destroyed. So at least the way I read that, it looks to me as though we do have the authority to grant the request.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make one. Otherwise, we can move on.
I'll make a motion to destroy the cigarettes in question.
Second.
Okay, we have motion probably second. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Ms. Puckett. Okay. Move on to 706. Slacky.
So as I'm sure you all recall, the previous meeting, I gave some recommendations on an overhaul of the cost provisions of the existing FOIA policy. The FOIA policy has been in effect since 2018. The policy, I'm calling it a FOIA cost policy and also a plain English overview, because prior to July 1, the Freedom of Information Act required governing bodies of greater than 250 to have a quote unquote a plain English statement and include certain notices with regard to the rights of requesters and the responsibilities of custodians of records. So the last meeting I represented just the proposed edits to the cost provisions, and I was directed to review the full policy for proposed amendments. So in your agenda packet, you have a markup of the 2018 policy. The policy changes are shown in underlining for additional drafting, and strike-throughs show edits. From the bottom of page 5 through 7 is the content that was presented at the previous meeting. So really the content that I'm presenting tonight is just that content on pages 1 through 4 and page 8. Most of this is plain English language that's largely parallels the model template that's presented by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act Council. So the parts that are optional and likely of the most interest to this board have to do with the cost provisions, which I was directed to take a look at a concept of only charging non-residents for FOIA. And so I don't feel that I can share the substance of those edits with the general public, other to say that I do have significant legal reservations with that. I have not found any other jurisdiction that has that kind of format. Most jurisdictions have a monetary or hourly threshold for what trips it into a cost proposition. I did add some language to hopefully clarify that attempts will be made to process things as a customer service request. So that's on page 3 under the heading responding to a request for public records. So the workflow now provides, as a proposed amendment, unless a FOIA request can be immediately processed as a matter of customer service by providing a website link or inspection or copying of records that's readily available without legal consultation as to possible exemptions, FOIA requests should be directed to the FOIA officer. So that kind of captures, I think, existing policy, which is when people are walk-in or they have a phone call, they're not charged for those encounters with staff. If they're just requesting something that's off the shelf, I just want a copy of my neighbor's erosion and sediment control permit. That's something that staff can easily process and do. So the cost provisions, as previously proposed and consistent with the 2018 policy, they only apply if more than a half an hour of staff time is dedicated to the work of processing and responding to a FOIA request. The additional drafting from what you saw at the previous meeting, it mostly just has to do with updates to legal requirements, some minor clarifications, some minor, and also just some changes with the times. So the 2018 drafting mentioned you could get your results from your FOIA request on by computer disk, and that's just not not the way we process things these days. We if we get a request to do so, we would, but most laptops, they don't even have a floppy disk or a CD-ROM component as a part of the unit. So if that's been changed to a storage device, if someone requested something on a thumb drive or other format. I also, in your agenda packet, I included some data that was represented partially at the last meeting, but thanks to Jackie Fish, it was further detailed that from January 1 of this year to the third week of June, the county received approximately 50 FOIA requests. Most of those requests concerned documents that are retained by the Department of Community Development. That's not unexpected. They're the ones putting out a lot of public notices, and people are seeking that information. Only 8% of requesters received a bill. And I think I'm just ready for any questions that you may have about the proposed policy.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Slacky? Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So why did only 8% of the people receive a bill?
So the typical processing for a FOIA request, if it's not the type that I described where it's like an off the shelf, you know exactly what file, what permit, what document someone is requesting. If you have to do a search, those requests are routed or either received directly through the FOIA online portal on the county's website. Those are received by Ms. Fish. Ms. Fish sends an email to the people who are likely to have responsive documents. And usually the very first part of her request is, let me know if this is going to take significant time so that I can let the requester know. We do typically let people know if the estimate is going to exceed $200. Otherwise, it's up to the requester, and there was a change in the law last year. We're obligated to tell requesters that they can request a cost estimate. So some people do that, or they'll say a threshold, like if this is going to exceed $50, let me know. So the first step in the request is to ask staff if this is going to require significant time and effort. If so, we prepare a cost estimate. If that cost estimate exceeds $200, then by law, we can request a deposit. Customarily, the county requires deposit of half of the estimated costs, and then the requests are processed. But the policy since 2018 has been that unless it takes more than a half an hour of staff time, then those costs are not billed. And when I say staff time, it's the staff time at the hourly rate of compensation for people without benefits is what is the charge that's billed. And then occasionally there are some other costs that are detailed in the policy. If someone requests something by mail, the actual postage costs. There's a pretty nominal charge for hard copies of documents if there is copying involved.
So staff time. So if I make a FOIA request and I ask for X, Y, and Z document, and the person or persons that have that document are the ones that produce it to the FOIA officer, is that correct?
In most cases, if it involves email searches, then oftentimes Mr. Dines himself is personally involved in that process of retrieving the emails, and then it has to be sorted through the emails to make sure that the emails are what they are, because you're getting hits based on keywords or terms that might not actually be within the scope of what was requested.
So any staff other than Ms. Fish, is there any review process that goes through the county administrator to release this information to Ms. Fish to be released to the person? So how many staff people need to be involved in that? So I don't want to pay for a county administrator's fee when I could pay a less expensive fee for someone that has the record?
Understood. And one of the recent legal changes to the statute is that governing bodies are required to provide reasonable efforts to produce things at the lowest cost. So one of the changes you'll see is I've taken out mentions of department head. There was formerly a chain of command where department heads had to sign off on release of information and certify that that's happening. Now, of course, department heads need to have trained staff who are capable of doing responses, but the effort is made so that the person who has the least salary but is capable of producing without exceptional time and effort the document is the person who's typically tasked with the response.
Does a department head or any other person review the information that's being ordered to the FOIA office? Or
I would have to say it depends. So in the Freedom of Information Act itself, there's numerous exemptions and exceptions. Some are mandatory, some are discretionary. So usually depending on the nature of the request and the level of training that the person is receiving the request, sometimes they know right away, hey, I can't release a social security number. I'm going to tell Jackie to redact that. And that's something that somebody can pretty much, I would say, 95% of county staff would probably know how to do that automatically. But if it's something more complicated that rises to the level of needing my attention or the attention of Ms. Washington, we'll take a look at it. But we do not charge the hourly rates of professional staff of the attorneys for reviewing those exemptions.
so if I request something from Ms. Hall's office and I come to the window and ask for a 300-page document, does that staff member run it through Ms. Hall before it comes to me? Or does it go to her? What's the chain?
It would go directly from staff and community development to Ms. Fish. And that's typical.
Would it go through Ms. Hall first?
Most of the time, no.
So I won't be paying for that.
No.
So when you mention share of information to the public in regards to some of your legal research, so I saw some email that you sent to us. Is that the legal research you're talking about?
Correct. There's a confidential legal memorandum summarizing the findings on that topic.
So why would that be confidential? There's nothing in there that would subject the county to anything other than your legal opinion. I know that there's attorney confidentiality. That's your choice, but why would that not be shared with the public? So the whole FOIA thing is supposed to be transparency, and so when you can't share that information that has no bearing on anything that's business of the county, I don't know why that couldn't be shared.
So one of the exceptions is for legal advice and consultation. So that is a common exception. It's one that I'm professionally obligated to maintain unless a majority of this board authorizes me to release a confidential opinion.
So, but there's nothing in there that's confidential other than you sending it to us.
It's a legal analysis. So my risk analysis of what an action would be and what types of challenges it could encounter are something that could subject you all to legal scrutiny. So that's why it's a protected document for your eyes to review as you make the policy decisions that affect the county.
So again, I want to go back to, there's nothing in that document that you sent us other than you want the confidentiality that the public couldn't see. There's nothing, there's no on the FOIA exemptions other than, I understand the exemption that you're speaking of for yourself. But I'm saying there's nothing in that document that would be confidential to the public. Is that correct? So if you do legal research,
Any advice she provides to the board, she serves the board of supervisors. So any advice she provides is between the board of supervisors and the county attorney.
Well, especially when we're dealing with FOIA, you would think that they would tell the public what she found when she did the research. I would think that that's the whole idea of FOIA is transparency. And so when I read that, I didn't see that. So in the code section, it speaks about we may charge, we don't have to do that. But we've decided to do it 8% of the time. So, I think that so it all depends who asked for it and what they asked for is whether you're going to charge them or not.
It doesn't matter who asks for it. It does matter what they ask for and how long it takes. So that's what it comes down to. It's not we've decided 8%. It's that 8% has hit that threshold in order that it requires some amount of payment in order to compensate for the staff time that is being taken away from doing other activities in the county. So it is time of staff that is required. A large percentage of them can be fulfilled without requiring a fee. And as my understanding, it sounds like community development is hit with the most of them. And I know we have a number of historical documents in community development. And people could reach out and ask for historical information about property back to the 50s. And who knows how far it could go back. That may not be scanned in yet because we are working through those processes. And if that requires then staff to then say, okay, I'm going to take away time from serving the constituents in other ways that are the role of community development, so I can pull those files and like search through, find those physical documents, pull them, scan them, create the documents that need to be created in order to make it available to someone. That takes time. And so at that point, it does have a cost. And so that's just the situation it is.
So is a provision for low income folks that can't afford to pay these fees for information?
No, it's my understanding.
I'm asking her, sir.
There's no income exception. There is in the policy. It provides that the Board of Supervisors can grant waiver, and so the primary example that I've given is when the information is of such benefit to the public that it's something that you would like posted on the website or included in a future agenda packet. But you all would have the discretion if somebody had a particular case and a particular rationale for why they needed a document for free. But the cost estimate process would be the way for people to see if what they're requesting meets their expectations. Oftentimes people are surprised when they get their cost estimate, and the cost estimate is kind of a good check, because if somebody, as Mr. Granger used the example, somebody says, I want all the records on this property from the beginning of time, that's a different request from I would like the records for this property for the past 5 years. That's something that would be much more manageable and likely available at much lesser cost.
In the Freedom of Information Act, it says that the FOIA officer can ask you if you want to close in your gap of what you're looking for.
Correct. So your FOIA request has to be made with reasonable specificity. So if the FOIA officer can't tell what you're asking, or sometimes they're just being helpful because they want you to know, whoa, what you're asking for is going to involve multiple departments, multiple years of searching. Is there something you have in mind? And some people don't want to say. They want to be private and they don't want to say what they're looking for, and they're not going to reduce their search. But oftentimes people will say, well, what I really wanted to know was I wanted the presentation on the sheriff's office equipment that was made at the meeting. And when that's clear, then that's something that's very easy to process and would be under half an hour and at no cost.
So if someone requests information from one of us up here, is there a fee that's attached to that?
So ultimately it's the custodian of record who's responsible for reporting their time. So if Jackie has to ask you all for handwritten notes, text messages, social media content that's of a public nature, that would be something that we would require the participation of a supervisor, and the supervisor would be asked to provide their time, but should they choose not to, that's not something that there's any enforcement mechanism over a supervisor.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Ms. Bender?
Yes, in that 8%, and I appreciate the graph Ms. Fish had created for highlighting it. I know myself have been involved in a couple of them. This is going back several years, especially one that was very time consuming and had a lot of information that had to be provided. But in that 8%, is that usually, it's probably not average citizens that do that 8%. Is that about right? Very rare, probably these huge documents they want.
What's an app?
I would say it's a mix. So sometimes, I think as I mentioned at the last meeting, sometimes there are attorneys who want to do their discovery through FOIA because it's more cost effective, and they also want to see if they have a case from the get-go. So you have those kind of things. And sometimes you just have citizens who, in recent situation, we've had citizens who believed a document existed that didn't exist. So they reframed their question multiple times and asked for multiple searches, only to be told that time was expended and nothing was turned up. And I'm sure that's very frustrating, but that is also part of the search process. There's not always a hit, quote unquote, when you're searching for records. I also, I think it's pertinent to the question that was asked. When I asked Ms. Fish, just prior to the last meeting, I just asked her anecdotally, hey, how many FOIA requests do you think you had? And she said, oh, I got 5 today. So it ebbs and flows. But if you have one staff member who receives 5 requests in one day, and there's a very tight timeline to respond, it's a significant amount of time. So just an example of kind of how you can't say there's a one size fit all, and why there's a range of course, providing prompt customer service and honoring the letter of the law, but also can be significant staff time involved.
So, Mr. Chairman, so from my last comment last time that we talked about FOIA, we're paying employees to do their work, which includes giving the customers, citizens, information. So we'll have to pay them twice. So if I wanted 500 documents, I'm gonna pay my taxes, it pays the salaries, and then I'm gonna have to pay for the documents. Whereas someone from outside of the county doesn't pay for that staff. I'm already paying for it, is what I'm saying. I'm already paying for it.
I wouldn't agree with that because you don't know the number of FOIA requests you have coming in. If you were to have in 1 year 10,000 come in, and then the next year you have 0, that means so what you're saying is find someone who's going to be, their sole purpose is just FOIA, and they're not going to be doing anything else. But you have to have enough staff then in place that can meet surge, and that means then they still have to reply within the time frame. And that means then we have to surge and provide other county people who might be doing other jobs, that then they have to pull back from doing those jobs, serving the citizens, whether it's in community development to provide plan reviews or whatever it may be. Then that means that we have to meet those needs. And so there is an increased impact to what the services that can be provided that we are paying. It's similar to like how in community development, there's a fee for submitting plans and going through that process. The salaries are paid for, but part of those things are also covered by the fees because that is the service for that individual that's being met, as opposed to just this across the board saying it's available to everyone, anyone can use it, but if you don't use it, you pay for it. So it's putting a little bit on the user as well. But I mean, FOIA would be really challenging, especially if you did make it free. Then, I mean, at that point, it is really just anyone could come in at any time, and you could get big corporations coming in, and I'm sure they'd come in and just start asking for whatever they want. And you're required by law to provide that information. And I think it would have an extremely negative impact to our community because it would have a negative impact to staff and their time in order to just be able to meet the needs of citizens. I just don't see that model would be a model that would provide success for this community.
So I see government. I see it differently than you, and I've been involved in government in many capacities, and I see how government constantly tries to do things to not provide information. It's from the federal level all the way down to county level. and I see it all the time. I see more and more of this, the transparent FOIA, how FOIA has been diluted over time, not increased, but diluted. When you spoke about the community development fees, I don't think citizens should have to pay to get a permit for whatever they're building because they're already paying them. Now, builders and all that other stuff, yes, but so when government becomes more aggressive in not allowing information out, it becomes more problematic for citizens who's trying to actually determine what's going on. So, I mean, my stance is pretty simple. You know, we need to make it more available than less available. If it comes to the point where you have to have one person, like other counties and state, and they have FOIA officers, if that's what it comes to, then so be it. You know, that would be spending our money wisely, I would think, to do that.
And they have those officers and they still have those fees associated with it at threshold. Yes.
Mr. Chair, a motion, I move adoption of the rights of requesters and the responsibilities of King George County under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Okay. Move on to 0707, County Attorney request to advertise public hearing for access easement requested for residential property fronting Potomac Drive.
So Mr. Miller and I received a request. It was on behalf of a property owner through a realtor. The property owner owns a residence at 5080 Potomac Drive, and they're trying to sell that residence. And what they've encountered problems because the existing driveway crosses through two adjoining properties. One of the properties has a property owner who passed away and has over 25 heirs. So resolving getting a confirmation that the existing driveway can exist at that location is cumbersome. So they've looked at the surrounding land and noticed that there is a 20-foot roadway that is county owned that provides access to an undeveloped parcel. And they have requested that they relocate their driveway as a non-exclusive easement to a portion of that 20-foot road. The Department of Community Development actually has no objection to this relocation because it would provide for access that's more conforming to a non-conforming situation of an access cutting through two properties, and this shared driveway kind of overlapping with some other things. So they actually said that they would have no objection to this proposed use of county property as an easement for a driveway for this location. It's possible that there's a handful of houses at this location. It's possible that other properties could also benefit from a similar easement. There is one challenge in that there is an overlapping boundary line on a portion of the 20-foot road, but it's on the opposite side of the road from where this house is located. So I don't think it would provide an issue with providing an easement, should this board choose to benefit this particular property. In order to convey an easement, and a notice of public hearing would need to be prepared, and you all would have to enact a deed of easement, which I could prepare if that's the will of the board.
All right, do we have any questions for Ms. Lackey? Go ahead. I'll start with Ms. Bender.
I just have two quick questions. The undeveloped parcel that is the county owned, where is that? I wasn't looking even at the map. It's still a little.
So in your agenda packet, probably the best way to explain it, there's a highlighted, I think it's highlighted in green, is the parcel where this property owner owns. And then there's a narrow little strip, that's the 20-foot road. And then it goes past about 2 to 3 houses on both sides of this road. And then there's just an open vacant parcel. It was acquired by the county in 1986. There's a note in the deed that it was somehow intended to be for the Dahlgren Sanitary District. So I consulted Patty and Travis, and they didn't have any background. They suspect, but they don't know that it might have been purchased as possible expansion area for the Dahlgren wastewater treatment plant, but it hasn't been used for such purpose.
How big is the parcel?
I'm not sure. Let me see if I can answer that question quickly. It's approximately 13.15 acres. So that was a survey performed at one time, so plus or minus around 13 acres of county property.
Okay, thank you.
So this document here, Ms. Lackey. So that right there, in between there where the dotted line is, can you see that? You see the dotted line about midway up there?
Yes, so the easement is proposed where that dotted line is that extends from Potomac Drive to 5080.
So that dotted line, that land between the yellow marks, is that owned by the county?
That is.
And then when it comes back to 988, is that county property you speak of?
Yes, so that's the tax parcel number of that county-owned property.
So it's county property, so wouldn't that open up some problems if we have an easement on that road?
So they have proposed a draft easement. I would certainly have some proposed revisions to it with regard to maintenance in particular.
So an easement, that's a legal document that allows someone to travel across that for wherever reason, travel or have pipes or whatever, right? Correct?
Right. So the easement document would specify what rights they would have. So what they've asked for is an access way to access their house. They'd like to relocate the driveway for non-exclusive use. So potentially other property owners could use it, as well as if the county were to develop the property or sell the property, it could be an access way to multiple properties.
So then how many houses would be on that easement that has access to it?
Currently, it's proposed as one, but looking at this GIS image, there are it looks like 5 residential properties that border that road.
Go ahead.
I have a question on this of the exact location, is because there is a section of Potomac Drive that has some flooding issues because of the culvert there and other issues. Is this near that area? You know where I'm speaking of? No?
I
Okay.
don't.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm not certain of that. I would have to check on that.
That area with the flooding is farther, if you're looking at that picture to the left and the north.
I just want to, you can't see it from this map, but thank you.
So have you done legal research in regards to having a county-owned property as an easement or public traffic?
So I have not done exhaustive research, but I have handled easements on behalf of other public bodies in Virginia. In larger jurisdictions, there's often a policy and a process for divesting ownership or granting easements, and there's not a formula or a template for how this is accomplished in King George. I did find an easement that was granted through the administrative building parking lot to some of the adjoining properties. That's probably the closest precedent that I could find for this situation.
Could we, I know that you have to have a public hearing, but could we have some further research on public land as easement for the benefit of, basically it's a benefit for someone to sell a house.
Right, so that's definitely a consideration is are you interested in facilitating this request? They have other legal recourse. They have an existing driveway. It's difficult, but not impossible for them to clear up the title issues with their existing driveway.
So when you mentioned the title issue, so you're talking about the 25 folks that are in this estate?
Right. So they could go to the circuit court. They could file pleadings to establish, ownership of the driveway if they have evidence of use for more than 20 years. But they would have to potentially notify all of those owners, and it would be quite an exhaustive process, but not impossible.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just FYI, I did receive a email from some of the family members that own property there. They've said they've had the property there for decades. They've been using that drive under a gentleman's agreement for many, many years. They're just concerned that if they change that the folks are going to have to get on, and it's going to be costly to. If something should change with the gentleman's agreement that has been in they've been working with for decades, they're just concerned that if it does change that they'll all have to have new driveways to be cut in, cost for them. And basically, he had said that it's a gentleman's agreement that has been working for decades, just don't mess with it. So they're very concerned with that. But he said he will come out if it does go to a public hearing to speak more about that.
Mr. Chair, yeah, a question. So I believe it was stated at the beginning of the presentation, Ms. Lackey, that community development staff did not see an issue with this and thought there might even be a benefit. Could we ask staff to come forward and explain that to us, please? Thank you.
Just as far as it being in compliance with the zoning ordinance, we didn't see a huge issue with that. Like as Ms. Lackey said, it does appear that this property has kind of a driveway that cuts in front of the house and even connects to that road. So it's possible they're already using that road, and a easement to connect would, in our opinion, make it less non-conforming. But that's just in regards to the zoning ordinance, not necessarily a benefit to the public good or anything like that. That wouldn't be our place to say.
Thank you very much.
Louis, so is this non-conforming now?
Yes.
Okay.
In that if they don't have an easement that provides them access under our current ordinance, if you were to try and gain access today, you would be required to have an easement. So if there is no easement to that property now, it is non-conforming. But that doesn't mean it's not legal non-conforming and that it's allowed to continue in that use.
It's non-conforming because whenever the ordinance was made, they were already doing it. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions for community development?
Mr. Chair, I move to direct staff to advertise a public hearing for access easement requested for residential property fronting Potomac Drive as requested.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. County Attorney.
So I have an additional item this evening. Chief Moody was not available to present this item, but he did share his information with me. On June 27th, St. Mary's County, Maryland had a house fire incident in which there was a line of duty fatality. It's a small department. They were very devastated by this occurrence, and they were reaching out and looking for help because they just needed some help and some additional staff coverage while they were having, grieving staff members who were unable to answer calls. So Chief Moody reached out to me and Mr. Miller. He wanted to help, but he wanted to make sure that we were doing it properly. And the county's emergency operations plan does provide that the county administrator can provide some mutual aid. However, because this was across state lines and it was a special situation, we executed a temporary mutual aid agreement for a maximum duration of 72 hours. And 5 personnel from King George Fire and Rescue responded to assist with making service calls. Their active time was during 1 5-hour period. They responded to two potential incidents and 2 calls. So Chief Moody estimates that the internal cost that King George County probably could associate with the event was $1,500 or less. So that I mentioned that this was a temporary mutual aid agreement. There's interest by staff to develop and bring forward to you all a more permanent mutual aid agreement. But the action for this evening would be that the temporary mutual aid agreement provided that the internal costs would only be waived subject to ratification by the Board of Supervisors.
Do we have any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I will move to ratify the waiver of costs associated with mutual aid provided to St. Mary's County as requested.
Second.
Motion properly second. Do we have any discussion? I'll just say I really do think it's important us to codify MOU with St. Mary's. So I'm glad to hear that chiefs want to move forward with that. I know we certainly make use of a number of mutual aids, and our neighbors have been, good neighbors. They've helped us out a number of times, and so having the opportunity to help other people is good as well. So look forward to seeing that MOU. So, all right, motion properly seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right, I believe we are up to Mr. Minor.
Chris, what agenda item are we? Are we on the tourism application?
I apologize. The Department of Economic Development and Tourism Incentive Ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the board. Tonight, I'm presenting on the Technology Zone Ordinance as well as the Defense Production Zone Ordinance. I have a brief presentation just to recap with the board. I believe in your board packages, you should have had both completed ordinances. I'm happy to take any questions after the presentation. You should also receive the board report that summarizes the reason for doing this, the reason for putting in incentives, as well as the way that it coordinates with our economic development strategic plan. Thank you, Chris. So for the agenda, we'll talk about why incentivize, what the internal process will look like if adopted, the eligibility for proposed technology and defense zones, the proposed incentives, and then for this presentation, I actually added the proposed areas just to recap for the board again. So why incentivize? State incentives require it, BDP, when they attract businesses to or companies to the state. There are incentives that require a local match, such as the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund and the Virginia Investment Performance Grant. Competition, I think in a perfect world, no locality would incentivize, but this is not a perfect world. There are localities that are distressed, that need to incentivize in order to create jobs and to create economic activity. So as long as other localities are doing it, King George will have to figure out a way to compete against them, and incentives are a way to do that. So it's also to target specific industry sectors, in this case, technology and defense production. Also to create local industry specialization, We're lucky in King George where we're already sort of defense and technology based. So I think this aligns perfectly with our economic development strategic plan, but also where we're heading in this community from an industry and economy standpoint. So the internal process for this, the applications will be submitted online. I believe I provided a draft application of what that looks like. I'm happy to take any comments or questions on that. Staff will review that application for eligibility based on the information provided. Staff will then conduct an economic impact analysis. That impact analysis will actually be provided to me from a third party, specifically Chamorro Economics and Analytics. There are other analysis tools, but that's the one that we currently use here. It'll let us know what not just what the direct impact is, but what the indirect and induced impact is on the county from the project. And then staff will provide a draft performance agreement with a recommendation to the county administrator to review by the Board of Supervisors and the King George Economic Development Authority. Step 5 will be for the Economic Development Authority and the Board of Supervisors will have to vote on the approval of the incentives. Step 6 is that if they're approved, the performance agreement will then be executed before any incentives are awarded. So business requirements, they submit a detailed application with verifiable information. They report annually on their performance for the term of the incentive. In this case, it will be up to 10 years and then up to 20 for defense production zones. So what we analyze is their job creation and investment. Jobs can be verified. The job creation that they do have can be verified through VEC. It's a quarterly report that we can request from the state, and then we can check in with the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasury Department on their personal property activity and the taxes that they paid the locality. So qualifications for incentives, we reviewed this at the last board meeting on June 20th. But expanding businesses located within the zones, they have a minimum capital investment of $500,000, a creation of at least 5 jobs within the first 3 years of expansion. For new or expanding businesses located within the zones, a minimum capital investment of $1 million, a creation of at least 10 full-time equivalents or full-time jobs within the 3 years. Defense production zone is actually the same. So proposed incentives. So reductions in whole or part for BPOL, machineries and tools tax, business personal property tax, permits, and user fees. Same applies for defense production zones. So the proposed areas, this just lays out the settlement areas, but the areas that we're taking into consideration are the Route 3 West settlement area, the 3 and 301 settlement area, a portion of the Claydale property. Thanks, Chris. A portion of the Claydale property, this is Claydale, this is ET, that was added. And then you have the Dahlgren settlement area as well. And then coming down here, I can just change the slide and show you what I'm talking about here. So at the bottom, the last 2 parcels of this settlement area is where the business park is going. It's right outside of it. Here's what it looks like up close. So it's just these 2 parcels, 3394 and 3395. Thanks, Chris. And then moving on to the Claydale property, which I mentioned earlier. This is your Claydale. This is actually in the settlement area. This is mixed zone with industrial, residential, commercial, ag. It's got a lot going on with it. ET is just zoned A1, I believe, or A2. And I'm happy to take any questions on the presentation.
Have any questions for Mr. Minor? Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
Can we go back to the maps?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you remove the one with Edge Hill?
Edge Hill?
I think there was one in our presentation. See Edge Hill office?
Oh, right here?
Yes.
So, ma'am, it follows a settlement area. So it's whatever the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors votes on for that settlement area. So if we ever move that settlement area, the production zone will just follow it, or the technology zone will just follow it.
Okay, because I had concerns, especially in the Edge Hill area, because there's a lot of small businesses there that already exist. And I know there's some commercial real estate there. So that was one of my concerns. Another concern I had was, how does this affect our current ordinance process? If we did this now, any business that came in, are they going to be under the current ordinances or future ordinance?
So, ma'am, this does not affect our ordinances whatsoever. So there was an internal discussion that took place, and it was found out that we can't use this ordinance this economic development incentive ordinance to skew our own ordinance or to go against what we already have in place. So we can add it to the ordinance, but it's kind of redundant.
So what I'm getting at is any business before our current overhaul is done that comes in under this, if we approve this today, just.
Yeah, ma'am, this has nothing to do with land use. This
Okay.
is all tax-based.
This is all tax benefits. Okay.
Tax and permits and fees. Yes, ma'am.
And then I agree with the length of incentives, maybe, looking at that a little better. And then the one other question is going out of my mind. I would like to circle back after everybody else does theirs because I forgot my last question.
So in regards to the Fairfax's comment and public comment, I don't know if you heard those. Did you hear those?
I heard a few of them. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I agree with all three of those, and two of them had to do with the incentive period and removing the status. So I would be a fan of those.
Right.
Mirror kind of what Spotsylvania has. And I would also be a fan of spelling out in the zoning ordinance that the incentives don't affect the zoning ordinances.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minor, for your presentation. So I have a question because the length of time has come up in public comment this evening. So I know you said the recipient would have to enter into a performance agreement with the county, correct?
Correct.
And so the county would negotiate the terms of that performance agreement. Am I correct?
Correct.
So the county could say, well, just because our ordinance says we could do this for 20 years for one, or we could do this for 10 years for the other, doesn't mean we have to. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So the county still maintains control and authority over what the terms of the performance agreement look like.
Correct.
Okay, so then it also states in the draft ordinance, it would need to create at least five net new permanent full-time employment positions located within the county filled within the first 3 years from the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So I read that as a clawback mechanism where if they don't do what they said they had to do under number one, the ordinance with that at least 5 jobs within 3 years,
Correct.
And I'm sure whatever the job threshold is would be included in as part of the terms of the performance agreement. Am I correct?
Correct.
So that would all be documented in the performance agreement.
Correct.
Okay, so with that, I do understand why the concerns were brought up, but I feel like the county maintains the authority and control over this process. So I'm okay with moving forward with it. Thank you.
Ms. Bender?
Yes, I did remember what, I'm looking at, we've referenced Spotsylvania a couple times, and they had a public hearing tonight concerning some issues with tech center data centers. But what they did is, I was impressed looking over their information last night, is they've spent 3 years developing their tech zones, their data center plans, everything. And they've had a lot of public input. So one of my concerns is if we could have some public, I mean, even if it's one public meeting where we explain this, because this is in the end going to possibly be in our new comp plan, and we're identifying areas that we are targeting for these industries. And so I think it's, if we're going to change the look and feel of that part, and that's a lot in Shiloh, we need to have some public, at least informational sessions or input, not just a public hearing. I think that's only fair to the residents, especially of Shiloh, that they have some input, because I don't know if they know that some of these industries might be coming their way.
Mr. Minor, one of the other comments I'd heard tonight was the board reserves the right to remove qualified status from business that is non-compliant with ordinance. So not necessarily the performance plan, but like if they were to be outside of compliance with our zoning ordinance, like whatever reason they do something they shouldn't be doing. Is there any way for us to address a situation like that in this proposed ordinance?
So, I would say right now, sir. So, number one, I have no issue with any of the proposed amendments to the ordinance, but a lot of those details get hammered out in performance agreements. So, if there's something that we want to protect for or control for, having it spelled out in the ordinance, I'm all for. But the performance agreement, because each project is on a case-by-case basis, the project could be done in phases. There are, economic, environment may change. It may be a recession now. Then when they come out of it, they went from saying we're going to create 5 to 20 jobs. So we may have to redraft or rework that performance agreement because that incentive may activate something else. So everything is done on a case-by-case basis. I would say those details could be handled in a performance agreement, but I'm open to whatever suggestions the board requires. Nothing that's suggested hurts our ability to attract. I think just having it in place and having a formal process that a business can look at, and says King George is proactively trying to bring me here, is what we're trying to achieve with this ordinance.
Then in my personal feelings, I would like to move forward with actually codifying in there if they fall out of compliance with the ordinance, that at that point the board would have an opportunity, or the county would have an opportunity to end that agreement because they're no longer just following the ordinance. I don't feel like there's ever a time where it'd be like, yeah, we want to continue this incentive agreement where you're not in compliance with our ordinances. So for me, I would like to see that codified in there because I feel like that's an always in there. And the other one, I hear what you're saying in regards to that this ordinance won't impact the current zoning ordinance in place. State law can always change. I would just have it in there so it's officially codified as well. Again, just to make sure that if anything were ever changed in the future that could open things up, that it's tight, I guess, for us. I get what you're saying right now. It is kind of pulling double duty, but I don't think it hurts to have it in there personally.
Agreed.
Okay. In regards to the years, I'm in favor. I heard what the Fairfaxes said, or Mrs. Fairfax had to say. I'm content with leaving them as you have proposed. As the county does have the opportunity, because that is the performance plan, and we don't have to go that high. But I kind of like having the opportunity to say we have that opportunity, because if you put it at 5, then you can't go above 5. So I'd rather never hit 20 and that's okay, as opposed to be like, wow, we want to go to 7 or some situation. So that's my feelings.
Sir, I just one comment to that.
Sure.
Again, every project is different. The 10-year or 20-year basis, that could help us if, say, one of the projects receives a state incentive, and that incentive, goes longer than that 10-year or goes longer than that 5-year period. So let's say we do put in 5 years. All that happens is that we just reapply. They would just have to reapply at that 5-year mark, right? So it's just another administrative process. That's really what we're doing. That's really what we're talking about here. Just more paperwork at that 5-year mark. So
I understand.
It's not a.
I don't mind addressing it at the beginning when we're developing the performance plan and say, hey, we can go up to this, and that's okay. So that would be my feelings. So I'll circle back to my colleagues though as well, because obviously we are asking for some changes here, and I don't want to make a command decision. Obviously everyone has their opportunity to speak. I think Mrs. Bender, and I'll come to you, Mr. Collins.
I appreciate this, and I understand doing research on this, that it is important, especially in the climate we're in, to attract businesses. I just, looking at the spot, I just think that we at least need to have one where we explain it to the public so they can see and kind of tell us that they kind of are on board with making some of these zones that we're going to attract these businesses. It's not a surprise to them. I mean, other localities have done it. And it doesn't slow down the process, I don't think, because it's not waiting for the new comp plan, which could take 18 months starting next year, but just doing at least an informational session before we have a public hearing so that people can understand it better with map. Maybe no one show up. Hopefully a lot of people show up, but I think we need to have that opportunity.
So is there a consensus of the board to have the that removal status that you spoke of and I spoke of?
So this would have to deal with business were to be out of compliance with our current zoning or with the zoning ordinance, that at that point, the county could cancel the agreement because they're no longer a good player.
Could we?
And incentives.
Allow the
Okay.
Ms. Lackey to look into the research, the legal aspect of that?
We might have to provide some kind of appeal process or something, but I think we can, I think I understanding the consensus of the board to have some kind of additional requirements. You don't get money if you're breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I add to that? Would the board consider also adding to that if you're in arrears on your county taxes as it is? Do you know what I mean? Like if you should not get this incentive if you're, yeah, because I know community development in the past has had people come and file applications for permits and such. And it turns out we have a policy already that if they are in arrears on their obligation, their financial obligation to the county, they need to make good on that before they, yeah.
Are you speaking of the incentive zones? If they're not, so if they own the property and they're not, and they're in arrears of their tax payment, that none of this applies to them?
Yes. So what if they're good, they get this incentive, and then it comes out later that they're not paying their taxes? We should be able to yank it for that too.
Right. That would be in the removal status part. Is there going to be? I'm sure Ms. Lackey will. I'm sorry. I have a bad habit. Is Ms. Lackey going to look into all the different reasons it could be removed? These incentives can be removed, like in arrears of property tax on a list.
So I can come up with a list. As Mr. Minor said, though, we can also always add to a particular performance agreement if there's something we feel is at risk for a particular situation. Most of these incentives would be a tax rebate, so they would have to actually pay their taxes before that they could get any kind of rebate of taxes, but it doesn't hurt to specify that.
Okay, I think there's consensus to ask to have that added as well then in regards to not being in compliance with their own tax payment.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Collins?
But they can, but the bottom line is we also have a provision in there, we can remove them. We have the power to remove them, and not just for the reasons there. It might be another reason that hadn't come up yet. But we have the ability, we have an overreaching ability to remove them from that.
I don't think there's anything in there to just remove it without cause that's been identified. Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying there might be a cause that's not identified yet.
I think it would have to be identified. I don't think I'll ask Ms. Lackey.
So like in a lot of laws, and there it goes to, tells you can't do this, this, and this, and this, and then you get to the end, and it just basically gives you another blanket of, this. Understand what I'm saying?
So I think if the objective is to kind of match or exceed other localities, we wouldn't want to have a way where we could automatically cancel an incentive, but I can certainly try to find some more examples and see if there's anything that makes sense. I will say that when Jessica Washington and I looked at this ordinance or these ordinances, we had some additional thoughts of things that we could add, but we thought we would streamline it and keep it consistent with the abandoned school revitalization zone. So the provisions would be kind of similar, although as we're saying in the incentive packages, they could all be different. They could have different agreements and different requirements. But that's not to say that something couldn't be included in this ordinance that's not already there.
I just want to have the ultimate authority from the board to be able to revoke. So not just, I want to have the board to have the ultimate authority of control.
If it's not codified in the ordinance for why it could be revoked, I don't think we could legally revoke it. Would that be a,
So right now, the ordinance is drafted such that any agreement would have to come before the board for approval. So you would have the approval action and you would see certain things and you would see certain metrics of progress that they would have to meet. But just an automatic revocation, we could specify it, but as I said, I think we would kind of be an outlier jurisdiction if we could cancel at will an incentive package.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make sure that we also, or Nick, well, Nick, thank you. Looks very good. I think it's very important that we have that here, and I think it'll do a lot. The time of the tax is definitely just make sure that we have that case by case basis. And the other thing is do we have the mechanism, company XYZ comes in and they're here for 8 years, they have 2 contracts, they lose their contract, and do we have the mechanism to get the tax back so we're not in a situation if they're at 10 years out and they're not paying their taxes, and do we have the mechanism to get that back?
So, Mr. Stonehill, they will pay their taxes every year to us, and then they will come before the EDA in order to receive that money back. So I will take I will review that application, or whoever received that incentive, I will review that application annually, take it before the EDA. I will make sure that their taxes was paid, and then we will grant that money back to them. So they won't receive an incentive unless they, 1, hit their performance agreement, and they also have to, and 2, they have to pay their taxes. So
I think the other thing is what you're asking though is it's a 10-year agreement. In year 8, they go belly up and they fail to fulfill the incentive. Is there a way to get whatever resources that the county has provided in incentives back? And I think that's something that we would want.
right. So we're going to be incentivizing new tax dollars. It's not our existing money. So that's why we're incentivizing an expansion to new businesses and existing businesses. They will only get an incentive on the new investment that they make if you're an existing business. So that tax revenue is already generated that year when they make their investment. At the end of the tax year, after they've paid, we make sure that they hit their job numbers and that they put in the capital investment that they said they did. After we evaluate that and we say, yes, they hit the number, they hit the capital investment number, they hit the job number. So here's what we owe them based off of what we agreed upon. Let's say it was 50% back on personal property. They paid all 100% of it. So they're gonna, they paid $100. We're gonna give them $50 at the end of the year. It goes before the EDA. The EDA votes on it. The Board of Supervisors cut a check to the EDA. The EDA disperses those tax dollars out to that company. So they have to hit that mark before they get it. If they're not paying their taxes, then they're already out of compliance. They're not getting the money, period. So,
Okay, it is more of a refund on their performance.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So, and this is how the state of Virginia does it. Now, not every company likes this, but the state of Virginia has a performance-based incentive system. So they have to hit their job numbers every year, or they have to hit their investment numbers every year in order for them to receive an incentive from the state. And then local governments almost always follow suit.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your work on it.
Thank you.
So who has the final authority to return the money? The EDA or the Board of Supervisors?
The Board of Supervisors. So we'll go through the process. We agree upon the process. It will go before the Board of Supervisors in order for that money to be transferred. But this is already an agreed upon process. So we already understand that this is going to happen. It flows from the county coffers. This is new tax dollars to the EDA. The EDA has to vote for the transfer of it as well, and then it gets dispersed to the company.
So shouldn't that be codified in the ordinance?
I think that is in an ordinance, sir.
I couldn't find it.
I have one more question. So are the maps that you showed, are they going to be part of this ordinance?
So that's how I'll advertise it. When I lay the ordinance up on the website, they'll see what areas that we've designated. And maybe that's something I can work with GIS as well.
because that's where my concern comes in, just to have that informational session with the public so that they understand. I understand the incentive system and what you're doing here to attract business, especially defense related for the base. But I just wish we have some more public informational so they see what it is, they understand. I'm looking at the way Orange County did it when they had it was a referendum. I'm not asking for a referendum, but talk so that the public knew and the developers knew where they wanted the houses, where they wanted the business, and where the government area would be.
Understood.
If I could ask a question to follow up with Ms. Bender. So, and I guess the board would have to weigh, the whole board would have to weigh in on this. You're requesting that some kind of a public hearing be held before the public hearing?
Not a public hearing, like we did with the CAP, like
Town hall.
Town hall, where you have maps, like we did in, what was it, 2018, 2019, so that the public can see and weigh in before we rush to a public hearing. I mean, it's just like one step, but other
No,
localities,
I just wanted to get clarification. If the board would like that, then we'll go ahead.
that has to be consensus. It's just something I'm throwing out there.
All right, I'll leave it to everyone else to.
I'm definitely not against the public having as much information as possible.
Okay.
I do agree with Ms. Bender, like we have tonight and then public hearing, and there always seems to be a quick push. I wouldn't mind having that town hall.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I'm good with that. If you want to have a public workshop similar to when the, whatever it's called, that community development had to do in 2019. Yeah, every 5 years, the code requires us to. And I can remember there were workshops and there were maps and everything. But with the understanding that that's not an opportunity for them to change those maps. It's the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors that does that during that planning process every 5 years. That's going to be informational only. And then that'll come up again in 2024, I guess, is when comprehensive plan, when the comprehensive plan gets updated again. So that would be the opportunity for the maps to be redrawn. This would not be an opportunity for that. This would just be an opportunity to show people where the locations are on the maps and the rationale behind adopting the ordinances.
That's what I think the citizens would appreciate without it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
For a public hearing.
And I don't think anyone was gonna, once we all started, everybody got going on the proposed changes, they were gonna need to bring it back to us again anyway, because that was just too much to, yeah.
I would like to also, just another point of clarification, you would like to see all of the proposed changes that have been discussed tonight, that have been proposed. You want to see that document come back, and then we would set a town hall. Is that correct? Is that the will of the board?
I think that is the will. I'll look for head shakes, yes. Okay, I think that's a majority.
So, sir, we're talking about do the changes, present to the board again, do a work session, bring it back to go for public hearing, not for public hearing, but to be request to be advertised for public hearing, and then we move on to the public hearing for adoption.
So I'll ask my colleagues, because I know it's a lengthy time. Could we make a proposal to request a public hearing and then have it set at a time that is obviously after the planned town hall so that it could be just ready to move? Okay.
So changes drafted first, town hall, come back for a presentation to request an advertisement, and then if the board agrees, you would move to adopt then.
Okay, what I was thinking was that maybe at the next meeting, we come back with the changes. We could propose to advertise for a public hearing. That would be after the date that we would plan for the town hall. And so it's just kind of having them all ducks in a row to be like, all right, we have the planned town hall on this date and the planned public hearing at this date after the town hall. But then we don't have to wait for another meeting to come back to make another motion to advertise, to wait for another meeting to have the public hearing.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
Okay, do my colleagues, are they mental? Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Then we'll move on. I believe, Mr. Minor, that you have another one, the Music in the Vines.
Yes, sir. Back Porch Vineyard is requesting the final third $7,000 of their $21,000 request in TAC funding for the Music in the Vines concert series. Back Porch Vineyard's Music in the Vines concert series was the first of its kind in King George. These events showcased local artisans, nonprofit organizations, and local attractions within the county. The next event is scheduled for August 19th. Previous approval was in the amount of $14,000 or $7,000 per event. The Tourism Advisory Committee requested that Back Porch Vineyard provided a recap to the Tourism Advisory Committee before additional funding be approved. Approval for the last of the concert series to be held in August. TAC recommended $4,000 to award Back Porch Vineyard $4,000 for this third event. Staff agrees with TAC's recommendation.
All right. Do we have any questions for Mr. Minor about this request? Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion to go with the tax recommendation that we approve the remaining application in the amount of $4,000.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Minor.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well, sir.
Mr. Minor, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So this Music in the Vines that we have in our packet, who was that prepared by?
I'm sorry, sir.
Application.
Yeah, all the information that they did.
Back Porch provided that after action report to the TAC. TAC reviewed it last or the week before last.
Yeah, okay, thank you. They did a good job on that. Thank you, capturing all that information.
All right, thank you. I'll let them know.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Ms. Hahn. Adoption and appropriation of the FY 23-24 capital budget.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. At the work session that was held on June 8, 2023, the King George County Board of Supervisors reviewed the capital projects budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 and advised staff of the projects to move forward. The purpose of this action item is to request adoption and appropriation by project as presented below and as per the attached funding solution that was in your board packet. It is recommended at this time that funding be appropriated as follows: for Parks and Rec, Barnesville Park Playground, $125,000, Sealston Access Road repaving, $150,000, Master Plan Initial Phase of $100,000. For the King George County Schools, school bus replacement in the amount of $583,856. The middle school scoreboard installation, $52,000. The Potomac Elementary gym floor, $110,825, and schools flooring at all three of the elementary schools in the amount of $145,000. For information technology, computer replacement, $70,000. Courthouse Meraki equipment, $100,000. Admin and Parks and Rec recabling for $160,000. Solid waste and recycling, the Sealston concrete repair at $75,000. Engineering, repurpose the old courthouse, $550,000. Phase 2, middle school turn lane, $500,000, and back to the repurpose of old courthouse. That's for the engineering piece. General properties, the funds for engineering of their new facility that got funds appropriated in the previous fiscal year of $125,000. The law enforcement patrol boat for $280,311, and ambulance replacement for EMS at $350,000. The recommended action is to adopt and appropriate the approved capital projects as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. I'm going to start by asking, I know after this we'll have a discussion about the preschool elementary school feasibility study. And I believe there was a majority of the board that would like to move forward with this preschool as soon as possible. So right now we're approving the CIP budget. The preschool was something that was identified as an option as part of the CIP process. So after the feasibility study, could we come back, because it's gone through public hearings with the Planning Commission and obviously with the board, and make motions to try to move forward with the preschool this year at a later date in order to, after entertaining the feasibility study.
Yes, once we have identified the funding source and where we're going to come up with the funds for it, yes, we could do that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Mr. Granger, I have spoken with Mr. Laux with Davenport, and they are willing to be here on the next meeting, August 1st. It will be David Rose, who is one of the partners, and he will be here to talk about your options. I will tell you that we already have worked with Dr. Boyd on the grant funding, and, you know, King George is in a very good spot in a lot of ways, but when it comes to grant funding like this, we're not in a good spot. The work that Davenport did showed that we probably would score very low on what the needs are to get funding through the state for, I can't remember exactly the name of the grant, but they looked at that, and
I think it's the literary, is it the literary?
the literary fund, yes. So we're still working with them, but they indicated that they could be here on the 1st, and we could start discussions on a public financing plan if that's what the board wills.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having him come at the next meeting, and so that we can continue to entertain this and find the right way forward for this community. Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Hahn about the proposed CIP?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adopt and appropriate the approved capital projects as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So when we were discussing this, the capital projects, there were some projects that I was not interested in, and they are on the list. So when I vote, I will vote nay because of those projects are still included, and I'll be outvoted. So that's, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. All right, Ms. Hahn again.
Yes, so during the fiscal year 2021-2022 CIP process, $75,000 in ARPA funds was set aside for renovations at the existing preschool. To date, there have not been any renovations, and it has been determined that it would not be advantageous to proceed with any renovations as we move forward with planning for a new preschool. Staff would like to increase the scope of the current preschool feasibility study to include the possibility of an addition of a new school board office and a 4th elementary school. Staff proposes to transfer funds as described below to credit the project for the preschool ARPA, and then to create a new GL line for the study in the amount of $75,000. So I recommend that you authorize the county administrator to transfer $75,000 from the ARPA preschool renovation line to a line to be created for the continuation of the preschool feasibility study as presented.
Well, this is the first reading. So if we vote, people won't be able to comment to us before we vote. This is the first reading of this. Or that money going for the new school board office in elementary school.
Okay.
I think that this should be the first reading and not be a vote, have this tabled until the next meeting.
All right, I'll ask my colleagues how you feel.
I'm willing to go for it right now because that I know there's a push for the preschool to happen now.
It's not the preschool in here though.
Correct. Let me finish my thought. I'm a big proponent of this, and that site is very specific and it has a lot of challenges. And if we're going to do this right, we need to have a proper study of that site to make sure that we can accommodate everything on that site eventually. Maybe not putting it all there right now, but it has to be done now, not later. So just transferring the ARPA funds to move to be able to pay for the study to be completed in the proper manner to make sure our tax dollars are being used properly and to take care of our needs for our school children, I think why do we need to wait for that? It just makes sense.
Mr. Chair, a motion. I move to authorize the county administrator to transfer $75,000 from the ARPA preschool renovation line to a line to be created for continuation of the preschool feasibility study as recommended.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. I believe we have Mr. Dines. Contract modification for GSA. I won't read the number, it's long.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You remember we brought this before you before, but it was before we got to the point we're about to adopt our budget. So with the summary, you see in your board packet the attached quote from Proactive for additional services under contract GSA 03212022-1400, which entails the monthly fee increasing from $21,315.68 to $26,200, or an additional $4,824.32. These additional services will include our fire and rescue employees, their computers and services provided by the contract to include the LabTech, ConnectWise, remote access, antivirus software, which the fire and rescue did not have previously. The license for these services will increase from a county total of 300 to 350. Additionally, we'll be receiving the Dragnet Honeypot cybersecurity token, which has been installed on all county network servers, desktops, laptops to enhance the ability to track any potential bad actors and to isolate their entry point into our network to a location that can be identified. So we'll be able to tell who they are and where they are coming from for investigative purposes. So this just adds an additional layer of cybersecurity. Finally, we'll have the mobile device management, which will allow IT to control, secure, and enforce security policies on the county-issued smartphones and tablets. This will be able to optimize our functionality and security with these devices and will further aid in protecting the county. Funds for these additional services have been included in the FY 23-24 operating budget request for information technology. So our recommended action is to authorize the county administrator to execute a contract modification for GSA 03122022 with Proactive Information Management LLC to increase the amount of the contract from $255,788.16 to $314,400 at the beginning of fiscal year 23-24. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dines. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So these funds were included in the 23-24 operating budget. What were the funds that were included, the 255 or the 314?
So with the quote, we had that extrapolated to the new account, the new amount of $314,400.
So what was approved in the operating budget? 255 or 314?
No, you haven't actually officially approved it.
What was the number that we approved?
$314,400.
Why is he coming forth, Mr. Miller?
Contract modification.
It's contract modification, I think, as Mr. Dines indicated at the time. You remember he wanted to let me use this. We redirected the way some of his purchases were being done. They were being done through capital when they really should have been operational. And then what happened is that there was a modification to this contract, and it happened after we had presented it to you. And I think if the capital improvement budget had been approved probably a couple of months earlier, it might have not been something that we would have had that information, I guess is what I'm saying. So, Ms. Hahn, would you want to explain that too further?
Also, we cannot approve the contract modification until the budget was approved Whenever we do a contract and contract modifications, we have to have an approved funding source. And so this funding was included in the operation budget, which was approved at our last meeting. And that's why he's coming tonight to do the contract modification for that amount.
And moreover, Mr. Collins, they send a contract to us, but I cannot execute that contract. Ms. Hahn and her staff are the ones that do the official contract for any company that we deal with. So in the packet, you will see where I'm supposed to sign. And I have a new one because that date got pushed back since we had to wait for this meeting. So that date that you see is not the actual contract execution date. The actual contract execution date we want to put to July 1st, of course, for the new fiscal year. So I have 30 days to sign that contract officially for them after it's been approved through Ms. Hahn and her staff to present to you.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Dines. And your bad actors, I had a bad actor get a hold of my credit card the other day. So who, I like that you can identify where they're coming from and who they are for investigative purposes. Who investigates that? Anyone?
Our CISO that monitors our network, since we don't have the ability to have an information security officer on site, it's all part of the package with our antivirus and spam control.
So these guys do it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Quit buying stuff on your county computer.
Was that on your county device, Mr. Stonehill?
No, sir, but I was notified I had a dead aunt die and left me 47 million. That came to my county email. They're just waiting for my wire information and I'll get it. I'll split it with you.
There's our preschool and elementary school, Mr. Stonehill.
Yeah, I got one more question.
They are welcome to have it.
Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So you keep sending out this stuff to us, and this has nothing to do with this. You keep sending us out all these tests, you know, and it gets a little annoying. You know, the stuff that Mr. Stonehill's get, the dead ant and all that stuff. But and you're cheating on your spouse and all that stuff. Can we minimize those things? I mean, I get them like 5 times a day.
I don't get that many.
Those ones are probably because of where you might be searching. Like if you search on a store, or sometimes even one of the newspapers has bad actors through there. But that kind of thing doesn't usually come from the tests that we do. That's not the kind of test we would do with our Know Before software. But something like that is probably cached from a website you've been to. So they get you through that way.
Yeah, I was sending them all the stuff to you, and then I stopped because it became so many of them.
Mm-hmm. Some of them are legitimate tests. Some of them could be actual people trying to get through. Our percentage of people that have fallen victim to even opening them has gone way down ever since we started doing the training. So that's why we want to do as much training as possible so everybody's armed against those kind of things.
I don't open nothing.
That's what I do. I delete it all.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I would like to authorize the county administrator to execute a contract modification to GSA 03-12202-1400 with Proactive Information Management LLC to increase the amount of the contract from $255,788.16 to $314,400 at the beginning of FY 23-24.
Second.
We have a motion probably second. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Dines.
Thank you.
All right, so we did do sheriffs at the beginning, so I think that's our last action item. I'm correct. So we'll move on to the county administrator's report.
Mr. Chair, it's I guess we're saving the the worst for last and the best for last. So I know that we certainly appreciate the comments that everybody had about Ms. Hall. And I will say that you have to stand up, and so does Mr. Pancotti, please. There's just a couple of things. One comments to thank Ms. Hall. I will tell you that we will have a some kind of a ceremony the week of her last day. I've been here 2 years, so I don't have quite the history that some of you other folks have with Ms. Hall. I think I've always found her to be a very empathetic and compassionate individual working for the county and serving this board and serving other boards and also serving the community, but also most importantly, serving her staff. She's probably the biggest advocate for her staff. And I know that she's done a good job and responsive. I know when I first came here, there were some concerns about the ability of the department to meet the needs of the community and addressing some of those concerns. And there was a survey done, and I think the survey was very useful in providing you all with assurances of the things that they were doing to try to address the needs of the community. It's quite difficult and challenging department when you think about, you're serving development interests, but you're also serving the average citizen who may have an issue with an easement that they need to get cleared up so that they can close on their house. And these folks, are there for them. It's also a job. I know that Mr. Stonehill and Ms. Kupka and Mr. Collins, having been in law enforcement, understand the difficulty sometimes that you're placed in to have to enforce codes and the law and things like that. And so the things that they have to do in terms of the building codes and the regulations dealing with the Chesapeake Bay Act, all the various aspects of that. And I think that Ms. Hall did a very good job of working with our community and addressing their needs. So I just want to thank her for that. Her last day, obviously, as you received my memo, is the 28th of July. And our next board meeting is the 1st of August. And so it is necessary, and I have a memo that I just passed out, that we appoint tonight a zoning official and the subdivision agent. And that is a board appointment. It is required that position have the authority of the board appointment. So I would ask that if somebody would entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Louis Pancotti as the interim zoning official and also the interim subdivision agent.
I'll make a motion as presented.
Second again.
All right, motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Ready, Mr. Pancotti?
Yes, sir.
You got some big stuff coming.
All right. Yes, sir. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you, Mr. Pancotti.
I do just want to say I appreciate all the opportunities that King George has afforded me over my career. I'm looking forward to a new challenge and being an average citizen and spending a little bit more time at home. But I assure you that Louis Pancotti is up to the position, and I have all the faith in the world in him. So thank you again.
Ms. Hall? So I know you're going to work for VDOT, but can you tell us what that job is?
I would prefer not to say publicly, but I will be around.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I want to publicly say something that I was on that Zoom meeting where I was talking about affordable housing. And I always told Ms. Hall this, but there was two developers in particular who mentioned of how positive an experience they had with the staff of community development. And I know community development sometimes gets the not the gold star by some folks because they think many different things, but they're understanding that you do your job and you're about regulation and protecting the citizens. But not everybody thinks that way. And I want the public to understand that there are out that I really appreciate what community development, and how you've grown and matured, and the department is very professional and does try to do the best. So I want to make that a public comment. Thank you.
If I may continue, so Mr. Messler has we have a memo, I believe, that is at your desks as well, that is kind of outlines our process. It also includes a bio of Mr. Pancotti. So I think that I said in my memo to you announcing Ms. Hall's resignation that the department is in good hands. I agree with Ms. Hall. You can see that Mr. Pancotti is very skilled, and I have the need to also just let you know that I'm going to have him serve as the interim community development director. We are going to start a search process that I believe you can see the outline of that. If you have any questions of that, we are certainly going to move this process along. I would hope if Mr. Pancotti is interested in the job that he would put his name in on it. But I do think that whenever internal candidates, sometimes the best situation is for them to compete. And if there is a desire to on his part to pursue this, then he'll be definitely one of the ones that would have to be looked at. But I also indicated in my memo that, and I really seriously believe this is important, is that you all would be somehow involved in the process, as well as somebody from the Planning Commission and possibly someone development or real estate community somehow that touches on all those aspects of things. So we will start the process. We'll have a update as we go along. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask Mr. Messler or myself, and we'll get you that information. I'm certainly happy to take any questions on that too. Broadband, Ms. Bender had asked or had talked about the plans that All Points has. I will let you know, and I have not done anything yet about it, but I have been asked by the Northern Neck Planning District Commission number 17 if we will pay the $150,000 remaining that we have on our obligations. My recommendation is that you direct me to inform All Points Broadband that they need to come here and have a meeting with you all and a presentation about their plan before any further funds are paid. Obviously, there's an obligation on our part, and I defer to Ms. Kupka and Ms. Bender, as Ms. Kupka was the chair at the time. I don't know that there's any clock running on this, in terms of what they're asking for, but I'm not advocating until you've had your satisfaction that this process is moving along. List of non-capital projects. We can defer that.
Mr. Miller, I think Ms. Bender might have want to chime in on the.
Yeah, do you need that right now or
no
before you complete your? Because I agree with you.
I need to. A good urging from y'all for me to outreach to the folks from broadband, All Points Broadband, to come and do another in-person presentation.
I'm in favor of having you reach out to them. I'm going to ask my colleagues, is everyone else amenable to Mr. Miller reaching out to All Points Broadband about encouraging them to come and provide another brief out to this board on the status? Mr. Stonehill's a yes?
So I'm a yes, but I want to point out the presentation that Mr. Miner sent us. I think it was yesterday. One of the slides at the bottom says, so I'm confused, Mr. Miller, at the timing of their request, maybe when had they contacted you?
So I received this invoice from the Northern Neck Planning.
What is it dated?
July 1 of 2023.
Really? Yes. So their slide says nearing completions of pre-construction milestone for phase 2. Billing for phase 1 will pause until substantial completion achieved in county.
Oh.
Is what their slide says.
So the local the local match for invoice number 1 was paid in August 6th of 21, the $500,000 that you committed. But this one is invoice number 2 is $150,000, which has not been paid. So.
Yeah, I'm in favor of making that request.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Sure. I guess let me just jump down to these meetings that you have coming up. So you have tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Here in the boardroom. You have the joint meeting with the Planning Commission regarding the Dominion Power process, if you will, of dealing with data centers and large energy type industries. And again, as I mentioned to you at the last meeting in June, that this was initiated by Dominion. They want to have this kind of level of public interaction, and so it will be an opportunity for you all to hear their process, what they go through, what their plans are, and they're doing this in all these jurisdictions that are having these kind of proposed projects coming forward. Ribbon cutting on the 13th at 6 p.m. at Sedell Brooks Junior Park for the shelter or the pavilion. I know Mr. Clark has done a good job of putting this together, and so I think he'd be very excited for as much participation as possible. Zoning ordinance update, open house scheduled for the 27th, 6 p.m. That is being coordinated by Community Development, and it'll be here in the boardroom. The other items that I just had was, I will point out that it was reminded by Ms. Hahn that most likely the reason you did not get a treasurer's report is that it was too soon in the month for him to, for the treasurer to process some of the information that is regularly put in their report. Non-capital projects of the to-do list, if you would like, I can, in the lateness of the hour, just refer you to what the document says. If there's any questions on it, happy to answer it. But we are moving forward on a lot of projects. That's it.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller?
Sorry, there's the anniversaries as well. So always the most important, I think, for folks to see who's got so many years of service.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, could we get an update? It doesn't need to be right this minute, but an email tomorrow with regards to, because we're just adopted another CIP, and last year we approved lights for some of the athletic fields, and I am just wondering what the status is on that, because it's been a whole nother year now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Do we have any other business to bring before the board? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
All right, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adjourn till Wednesday, July 12th at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned.